Hey everybody, real quick, if you need a recap of Bridgerton seasons 1 through 3, I've got you covered. Just hit the tab in the upper right hand corner, it'll take you right to it. Now, season 4 kicks off with what else? The new season. That's right, everybody is back home. That includes Francesca, John, and Eloise, who spent the off season in Scotland with John's family. They seem to really enjoy themselves, especially Eloise, although she's really happy to be home. When she walks inside the house, she's greeted by who else? Her best friend, Penelope. She tells her all about how great Scotland was, but there's just not enough people there, and she ended up talking to sheep. Meanwhile, the rest of the family greet each other. They're happy to be reunited once again. The staff are over in the corner, kind of gossiping about what's to come for the new season. There's nobody really for Violet to throw out to society. Hyacinth isn't ready quite yet. She's about a year off. But as they're discussing this, Violet Bridgerton walks up to the staff and says, everything's perfect, but where exactly is Benedict? Because he's the only one missing. And John, one of the carriage riders / wait staff, he knows where Benedict is. And Violet says, yeah, get the carriage ready right now. We're heading there. Now, when Violet gets to the location of where Benedict is, she is warned, hey, you might not want to go in there. It's a little sketchy, but she doesn't care. She's so annoyed that she storms into the room and she quickly realizes, yeah, maybe I shouldn't have gone in there because it is a mess. But not only is it a mess, just, based off of things strewn all about, it's also a mess because you've got Benedict in bed with a mystery girl and another girl sleeping over in the corner. And that's something that Violet wasn't expecting. It's also something that Benedict wasn't expecting either, but she basically says, you got to come home right now. When Benedict does get home, he has to go through the family affairs. Now, with Antony out and just living his life, even though Antony is the Viscount, it's fallen on Benedict to handle the minute details of the family trust. He doesn't really care about it, quite frankly. He basically does whatever his assistant suggests because his assistant knew what the Viscount wanted. But they get interrupted when Violet walks in the room. Violet is a little stressed out because unlike previous years where Lady Danbury was hosting the first ball of the season, this year it will be Violet Bridgerton. So she's got that to deal with, but she also has the situation with Benedict, who doesn't seem like he's really interested in finding a wife. He constantly misses family events. He's slutting up in the town. It's just a bad look overall for the family, a family, by the way, that still has to throw Hyacinth out to society. Benedict, however, doesn't think it's that big of a deal. He looks at Antony as the person who really needs to solidify the family name. He's just the second one, so he doesn't really matter. But Violet knows that couldn't be further from the case. In order to secure the approval of a possible wife's family, he can't be having this reputation of just being a slut. And right now, that is his reputation. These two go back and forth. Benedict makes his pitch about the fact that the girls in society are boring as hell and he's doing his own thing. He's being true to himself. Isn't that important? With Violet pointing out, okay, be true to yourself. Yourself is a member of this family. Respect the name of the family. Get your shit together. Meanwhile, not too far away, Violet's daughter-in-law, Penelope, has been requested by the Queen to show up at the palace because she wants to discuss the gossip for that season. Now that it's out in the open of who Whistledown is, it's easier for the Queen to dictate what kind of gossip she wants Penelope to seek out. Unlike previous years, it seems like this season is going to be a collaborative effort between Whistledown and the Queen is demanding a ton of gossip starting that night at the ball. This is putting a lot of pressure on Penelope, who has to get ready. Her family starts suggesting a couple of things they've heard, but Penelope, thinking about the long game, says, no, I can't throw that out there. It's going to ruin the girl's chances of actually finding a husband. I got to think about this strategically. But Penelope, just like everybody in society, that night has to get ready for the first ball, which, by the way, is going to be a masquerade ball. So for somebody like Penelope, this is actually going to be advantageous because she can get dirt with people not realizing who she is. And yeah, look, I'm not the only one, right? Like, we're watching the show going, like, how do you not know that's Penelope? She's literally just wearing an eye mask, but I guess they're just not as perceptive back then as they are now. Anyway, one person that is going to be late to the party is going to be Benedict. Now, even though he was told by his mom to show up on time, he decides to make a detour to it's a different kind of party. It's one where he can be more, as he said, true to himself. So as Benedict parties it up with people to more his liking, everybody else in society arrives at the Bridgerton household for that night's ball. For Violet, she has to make her way around, thanking everybody for coming, but there is one person that she really wanted to show up, and that is Marcus. And when she lays eyes on him, she is excited. She has to play it cool, though. She gives a hug to Lady Danbury, but when Marcus comes over, he's got her full attention. Although they keep it in their pants this time. Just giving cordial, hey, how are you? This is lovely. This party's great. That sort of thing. Eventually, Violet excuses herself because she is looking all over for Benedict, who hasn't shown up yet. But the search for Benedict stops when the Queen arrives. Now, the Queen wasn't guaranteed to show up at the first ball. She's not too happy about the fact that her best friend, Lady Danbury, decided to not host the first ball this year. But at the behest of Lady Danbury, the Queen has decided to arrive, although you realize pretty quickly why she decided to show up. It's not out of the goodness of her heart. It's to get the latest gossip from Lady Whistledown. Because shortly after she does show up, she tells Brimsley, go fetch me Whistledown. Now. When Penelope walks over, the Queen wants the latest gossip, but Penelope says, the season literally just began. I don't really have any. But then quickly realizes that's not going to be good enough for the Queen. So she promises her, hey, I'm going to find a debutante or two to crown as the diamond of the season for you. We'll put it in the paper. It'll be great. But the Queen has other ideas. She's no longer interested in throwing out a debutante. She wants to throw out a suitor this year. She wants to game plan with Penelope on who this number one suitor should be. They start looking around the room, however, and they don't really find one. Not one that fits the description of, the must-have bachelor of the season. But Penelope promises, I'll keep looking, and then she goes over in the corner to just find more gossip for the newsletter. It's around this point where Benedict finally does show up for the party. First person he sees is his mom, who scolds him on the fact he's 2 hours late, but he looks at it like I'm arriving, fashionably late, if you will. Lucky for Benedict, they get interrupted by Eloise, who he hasn't seen since she's arrived back from Scotland, so he hugs it out with her. But Violet won't be deterred. She interrupts the conversation between her children, and she says, Benedict, you being here is a big deal, okay? It announces that you're back in society. So you're going to go over and you're going to talk to those eligible girls over there. You're going to talk to them and you're going to show that you're back in society. And even though he doesn't want to do it, he does it anyway. It's extremely uncomfortable for him, but he grits his teeth and he talks to the really beautiful women. And while Benedict is suffering through having to talk to beautiful women, Lady Bridgerton continues to make her way around the party when she's approached by a woman named Lady Penwood and her 2 daughters. Now, she's been absent from society from the past couple of years because her husband's died. And you heard that right, husbands, multiple. But now she's back in society with her 2 daughters looking to secure a good catch. Like a Benedict Bridgerton type of a catch. Penwood's one daughter is named Rosamund Lee, and then the other daughter is named Posey. And the masquerade party is the first party they've ever been to, so they're kind of just wide-eyed about the whole situation. But after Violet excuses herself because Penwood asked about the eligibility of Benedict, she quickly reminds her daughters of why they're there. And she mainly puts the focus on Benedict, saying even though he has this reputation of being a rake, it's all about the name. So, essentially, go be seen by him. Attract him. The girls are going to try their best, but Benedict is mingling and doing as he's told. And everybody's kind of mingling at this point, including Penelope, who is trying to get dirt, and she's been able to get a little bit, but then she notices her best friend in Eloise is also mingling, which isn't really like her. It's not typical Eloise behavior to talk to the other debutantes, so Pen walks up to her and asks, what's going on? And it seems like Eloise has changed since coming back from Scotland. She admits as much. And she says, look, just because I'm not into this whole society thing and finding a husband doesn't mean I can't be nice to people. But the real change is her attitude regarding the season. She tells Penelope, I decided I'm on the shelf. Meaning she's accepted the fact that she will not find a husband and she'd rather be a spinster. It's pretty surprising for Penelope. She doesn't really quite know what to think of it, but they also get into the conversation about what the queen is looking for and how the queen is now looking for a bachelor and not a debutante. And when Eloise points out what you could write about Benedict, Penn says, oh, there's no way we're writing about Benedict now. Like, the queen wants somebody a little more established and not so much of a rake. Yeah, no, I'm not doing that to your family and your mother. I'm not writing about Benedict and saying he's the most eligible bachelor of the season. Unfortunately for Penelope, when she once again meets with the queen later on, the queen has her eyes set on Benedict Bridgerton. Again, Penelope and the queen went around the room. They started looking at possible candidates for this number one suitorship, but when the queen set her eyes on Benedict, it made perfect sense. He's got the name, he's got the looks, and even though Penelope tried to warn her, yeah, I don't think that's a good idea. Like, I don't think he's ever going to marry. The queen was dead set. No, that's our guy. And for Penelope, she's not really going to have a choice. She's just going to have to accept it. Now that the queen has her eyes set on a particular bachelor, that's all she can focus on all night. But at one point, she loses track of where Benedict is, and it gets a bit awkward because at that moment, Mr. and Mrs. Mondrich walk up to say hi to the queen, but the queen is so focused on losing track of where Benedict is that she completely ignores the Mondriches. And Lady Danbury has to kind of give him a look like, yeah, sorry. I mean, you know how the queen is. But Lady Danbury also wanted to take this opportunity to talk to the queen about something very important to her. The elephant in the room is that she's not hosting the first ball of the season like she has previous years. And she tells the queen, this is going to be my last year in society. Look, I've given a ton of good years, and I've contributed to society in huge ways, but I think it's time I ride off into the sunset. There's stuff I would like to do with my life. I mean, I haven't been to my birth home since, a while, let's just say. I'd like to do that. And she starts making her pitch about essentially being cut off by the queen. And at the end of it, the queen just looks at her and says, no. So unfortunately for Lady Danbury, it looks like she's going to be staying in society, whether she wants to or not. But the question remains, what happened to Benedict? Well, against his best wishes, Benedict did end up laying his eyes on a very beautiful girl that he had never seen before. And what really caught Benedict off guard was the fact that this girl was mesmerized by the beauty in the household. Like, she wasn't looking at anybody in particular. She was looking at chandeliers, and she just seemed so innocent in that moment. And unlike just about every other girl there, this one didn't seem like she was really focused on trying to be seen, even though she was. And she wasn't just seen by Benedict. A guy walks up and asks her for a dance card so he can put his name on it, and Benedict sees that she covertly hides it. And that's Benedict's opening. He walks up, he interrupts the conversation, he tells the guy, oh yeah, you know what, I found her dance card, but my name's on it. And that puts to bed any chance that this guy is going to dance with this beautiful girl before Benedict gets a chance to. When it's finally just the two of them, Benedict says, it's just rare to see somebody beaming with joy at one of these things. He then slowly guides her out to the dance floor, only to learn that she's not looking for a suitor. So the intrigue for Benedict goes even deeper. But when the music starts, that's when the girl tries to excuse herself. And Benedict isn't interested in losing track of this girl. He wants to continue to talk to her. He starts questioning why she has to go, and she finally blurts out, I can't dance. So Benedict says, oh, okay, we'll just go outside and talk. They head out to the terrace, and immediately Benedict starts saying it's a relief to talk to somebody not thirsty, if you will. And she says, well, you have to remember that these girls have been training their entire lives to just get your attention. That's it, just to be seen by you. I mean, they spent hours and hours and hours training for this moment. And that is something that Benedict hadn't ever considered. It really does change his mindset on everything. Then the mystery girl makes mention that she's not really all that comfortable being at society events. She's more comfortable appreciating the details of the events, which comes as a surprise to Benedict, and that's when he finally reveals who he actually is, because up until this point, this girl had no idea that she was talking to Benedict Bridgerton. She certainly, though, knows the name. She just didn't recognize him under that incredible deceiving mask. And that's really confusing to Benedict, because he says, wait, you know me from Whistledown, but you don't know me from society. You won't tell me your name. I mean, like, who are you? And every time he asks a question, the girl gives an answer. but she doesn't give any details on who she actually is. And because of this, Benedict is more and more into her. This woman is a mystery wrapped in an enigma, and Benedict wants to crack it, in more ways than one. Eventually, though, he does end up teaching her how to dance. They get close, it gets hot, it gets steamy. They almost kiss, but they don't. And then they hear a bell ring. Girl is really confused about what that is, and Benedict says, "Oh, it's midnight. It's time to reveal ourselves, including you." And he's excited for this opportunity, but she says, "Oh my God, no." And her mood changes. She starts telling Benedict, I gotta go. I have to go. I'm sorry. I gotta get out of here. However, before she leaves, she does end up running up to Benedict, kissing him, and then getting the hell out of that house. As she's leaving, she bumps into Lady Penwood, who, by the way, now that she's a widower, twice over, she's going back to her original name, Lady Araminta Gunn. But when this mystery girl bumps into Lady Gunn, her mood completely changes. It's like she's seen a ghost, and she's relieved when Lady Gunn just says, "Watch where you're going." And then she quickly gets out of there. Benedict tries to rush after her, but he gets caught up in a conversation with Colin, who he hasn't seen because he's, been busy. And by the time the conversation with Colin ends, he can't find his mystery debutante. However, most of the party is concerned with Penelope, Colin's wife, because at midnight, everybody revealed who they were, and right away, everybody noticed, "Oh my God, there's Whistledown." To which Lady Gunn told both of her daughters, "Go, be seen by Whistledown, show her that there's a diamond in the crowd," having no idea that Penelope has been instructed by the Queen to not focus on the girls, but focus on the boys this season. As everybody is leaving, though, Penelope shoots one last shot with the Queen to tell her not to choose Benedict. She explains that half the women in the room had their eyes on him, and moms are wondering what his intentions are, but she, having inside information, knows that Benedict is not looking for a wife he probably will never marry. She goes so far as to say Benedict Bridgerton is the least likely to marry. She would bet on it. And that's all the Queen needed to hear. She goes, "Oh, you want a wager? Okay, great. We have a wager. How much?" And Penelope realizes, oh shit. A little while later, as the staff is cleaning up the party and the only people left at the house are named Bridgerton, Violet walks up to Eloise to talk about what a good mood she was in at the first party. And Eloise tells her, "Well, that's because I'm going to be a spinster." To which Violet says, "No, you're not. No, I'm dead set on you and Benedict finding matches this season. I let you guys do whatever the hell you wanted last season because I was so focused on your sister and I was so focused on your brother. But no, this year, you guys, you're my projects." And you can tell that Eloise is not interested in that at all, but she also doesn't want to fight with her mother. She then walks into the other room where she sees Benedict, the most eligible bachelor in town, sitting in the steps, wondering what happened to this mystery woman, who she is. All he's got left, by the way, is one of her gloves, but when Violet asks him, "Did you see anybody you like?" he just lies and says, No one really. Of course, we know that this mystery girl is living rent-free in Benedict's head. So who is this mystery woman? Well, her name is Sophie. And the reason that she wasn't interested in finding a husband, the reason that she had to get out of there by midnight, is because Sophie works at the Gunn household for Lady Araminta Gunn. That's why when she bumped into Lady Gunn, she was concerned. She was worried she was going to get caught by her, but lucky for her, Lady Gunn didn't even recognize her. But just like Benedict, when she gets back home, all she can focus on is the person she talked to all night. However, she immediately has to go back into work mode when Rosamond, Araminta, and Posey come home. They start talking about that night. Rosamond completely lies and says that Benedict couldn't take his eyes off of her. But all three women admit that there was somebody that was keeping Benedict's attention for most of the night. And when Araminta says, "Well, whoever she is, she couldn't contend with any of my girls," Sophie takes offense. And she just kind of slams down the teapot and glasses and makes a little bit of a statement of her own. The next day, though, none of this is mentioned in the latest edition of Whistledown. She doesn't mention this mystery woman. She doesn't mention Benedict being head over heels because nobody knows. What she does mention is that while many people don't think that Benedict will marry, and she might be one of them, it's more of like the season can bring out surprises. In episode 2, you get some backstory on Sophie and Araminta's relationship, and Even though Araminta is listed as Araminta Gunn on IMDb, I apologize. Everyone's calling her Penwood, so, call her whatever you want. But these two first got acquainted when Araminta married Sophie's father, even though he referred to Sophie as his ward. It appears like Sophie's mother might have been a maid, and her father decided to go all Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the result was Sophie. Now, initially, when Araminta shows up at the estate, she's very nice. She introduces Posey and Rosamond to Sophie's father, but she had no idea about Sophie. So when Sophie's dad says, "Oh, by the way, here's Sophie, my ward. I will expect you to treat her as your own," it really throws off Araminta. She just wasn't expecting it. You can tell that while she says to Sophie's dad, "Oh, yeah, no, I will," she has no real plans on doing that. And that's basically what happened. She ostracized Sophie while putting her children first, mainly Rosamond. She doesn't really like Posey, for whatever reason. Well, no, there might be a reason. Posey's dumb as rocks. She's very nice, though. Fast forward, however, to Sophie's father's funeral, and Araminta lets Sophie know, yeah, unfortunately, you weren't in the will. Yeah, he didn't seem to care about you. Oh, and by the way, your mother, she was a maid. Now, Sophie finds this very hard to believe that her father, who always looked out for her, wouldn't have put her in the will. She just can't fathom how that would have happened, but Araminta is swearing up and down, yeah, no, he didn't put you in the will, but hey, don't worry, I'm going to take care of you now. And out of the goodness of her heart, Araminta offers Sophie a job at the estate. She says, "You will be a maid, just like your mother." And Sophie's not getting paid, because the way that Araminta looks at it, you're getting paid with a roof over your head, food on the table, and clothes. That kind of led to the fractured relationship with these two. Now, for the night of the masquerade ball, Sophie initially had no plans on going. But what really pissed Sophie off was the fact that as Rosamond was getting ready, she was complaining and just bossing Sophie around for no real reason, saying things like, "Oh, Sophie, you're jealous of me. You're misplacing my mask because you're so jealous." And as Sophie vented to the other staff members, she admits, yeah, you know what? I am jealous because they're going to go to this masquerade ball having no idea how fortunate they are. They're going to complain about this and that. It's never going to be good enough. They're not going to realize the beauty of being in society. And that's when our coworkers told her, "Sophie, why don't you go?" They encouraged her to borrow shoes from Araminta, to grab an extra dress, to grab a glove out of the attic. I mean, she piecemealed together an outfit, but they encouraged her to go out in society. That's one of the reasons why Sophie was so awestruck when she got there. It wasn't about finding a husband for her. It was truly about just being in the moment. Though what she wasn't planning on having happen was running into Benedict Bridgerton and falling for him that night. When Sophie gets back to the house, all she can think about is Benedict, and it's much of the same for Benedict. I mean, he has to do the Viscount's job with the Viscount being out of town, but really what he's doing is drawing pictures from memory of Sophie, just so he doesn't forget. And while he is the main subject of the Whistledown newsletter, along with a couple other tidbits, like Lord and Lady Kilmartin have decided to stay in London instead of going back to Scotland, which is a giant relief to Francesca. But no mention of Benedict missing at the party for a half hour with a mystery woman. And unfortunately for that mystery woman, the next day, reality swoops in to remind her of her place in society. This when Lady Penwood finds the shoes that Sophie was wearing the night of the ball, and she tells her, "You know what, I'm going to need you to clean these up because you're not being on top of your job, and I need you to clean up all of my shoes, along with Rosamond's." And this is going to take literally months, but for Lady Penwood, she doesn't care. All she's focused on is getting Rosamond and Benedict in a room together so that Rosamond can win him over. For Sophie, she's so annoyed that when she gets down with her two coworkers, they can tell that something's wrong right away, and finally they realize it must be something that happened at the ball. And then they realize that she must have met somebody at the ball, somebody that she can't really be with. And that's when she admits, yeah, I met somebody. His name's Benedict Bridgerton. They get super excited for her, but she reminds them, it was nothing. It's never going to happen again. He's never going to meet me again. Remember, look what job I have. So as far as you two are concerned, this never happened. This conversation never happened. I never met Benedict Bridgerton. and they just kind of give a nod. As the Penwood estate waits for Benedict to call upon either Rosamond or Posey, Violet decides to take out her project for the season, Eloise, out and about on the promenade to show her off. It's pretty obvious Eloise has no interest in actually doing this. Again, she wants to be a spinster, but Violet has other ideas. Although they get intercepted by Benedict, who offers to take Eloise around the promenade. And right away, Violet's like, yeah, that's a great idea. You guys would make a good pair. You both need to find a mate. This is tremendous. So she kind of falls back. But for Eloise, she knows that Benedict isn't doing this because he wants to. There's an end game. And he admits to her, yeah, there is. I met somebody and I need you to find this person. And all he's got is the glove. Now, unfortunately for Benedict, when Eloise asks him, well, what else do you know about her? He doesn't know a lot, which looks bad, but he explains, no, I asked her questions. She didn't really answer them. So the limited information he has about Sophie, he gives to Eloise, and they start going around the promenade as Benedict drops her off in front of a bunch of guys so that she can kind of interview them and see if any of their sisters fit the bill. And Benedict does the same thing with other suitors. He goes around interviewing women, unknowingly, of course. And two of those women happen to be Posey and Rosamond. And things were looking okay for Rosamond until Benedict asked, what were you wearing at the ball? And it didn't fit the description of his girl. After doing this for a few hours, Benedict and Eloise realize that if Benedict is to find this mystery girl, he's going to have to instill the help of Lady Whistledown. So they go to Penelope. And Benedict instructs her, write about me and write about this mystery girl, but do it covertly. Just do it so that she would know I'm interested. And this takes Penelope completely off guard because she thought that Benedict would never marry, but she does as she's asked. She writes in the newest Whistledown that Benedict Bridgerton might be entertaining somebody out there. And both Eloise and Penn warn him, you're going to have to deal with the barrage of moms, but he says, that's fine. Because that's how badly he wants to find Sophie. Now, a lot of what's written in that issue of Whistledown, if you were unaware, would look like it was just speculation. But to those in the know, they know that this isn't speculation. Those people being like Violet Bridgerton, who's very surprised about the latest edition of Whistledown, but also Sophie. Because even though she knows deep down that Whistledown is writing about her, she refuses to believe it. She doesn't want to get her hopes up. Unfortunately, after 7 balls, 6 soirees, they still don't have an answer. They still haven't found Benedict's mystery woman. Benedict gets so frustrated, he tells his sister, you're released from your duties. We're not going to find her. And the next edition of Whistledown, Penn writes as much, saying that the hope of finding Benedict Bridgerton's mystery woman is all but lost. For people like Rosamond, they're wondering, what the hell have I done wrong? Because she's convinced that it's written about her, which brings a big smile to Sophie's face. For others, however, like Violet, the not knowing is just driving her nuts. So finally, she goes to Penn, and she demands to know exactly what Penelope knows regarding this whole mystery woman Benedict Bridgerton looking for a match. And because Violet's intimidating, Penelope gives up the goods. So now, armed with actual information, Violet goes to Benedict, and she confronts him about all of this. She's mad that Benedict didn't tell her any of this, and Benedict owns up to it. He shows his mother the glove, and she says, see, this is why you should have come to me first, because I would have told you that you can locate your mystery woman at the Penwood estate, because inside the glove, there is the Penwood family crest. However, Benedict says, no, I've met them. They're not it. But his mother reminds him, there might be more women living there than you're actually aware of. So why don't you head over there? And the next day, he does just that. He heads over, but he doesn't call upon Rosamond. He's already decided, yeah, she's definitely not it. He calls upon Posey. And the relationship between Sophie and Posey is actually a really good one, because even though Posey is dumber than a bag of rocks, she's extremely nice. So when she tells Sophie, somebody's called upon me, Sophie's really pumped for her. Then she sees who it is. She's hiding behind the door. She's too scared to actually go in. And her coworker is encouraging her. Sophie, go in. He came for you. He's looking for you. And even though deep down Sophie knows that that's the case, she just tells herself that it's not. She's too scared of getting rejected, and she tells her coworker, look, he's looking for the woman dressed in silver. He's not looking for me. And obviously that is the case. I mean, at one point, Benedict inside the calling room says, what were you wearing the night of the masquerade ball? Were you dressed in silver? And Posey wasn't. She was dressed like a mermaid. But that line really raises Lady Penwood's alarms. It's just a random thing to bring up out of the blue. Because of the fact that it looks like he has once again struck out and he doesn't see any other women in the household, he does ask. They say no. Benedict heads out. But before he gets in his carriage, he's examining the glove, which is something that Lady Penwood and her daughters see. Now, the daughters don't know what he's looking at, but Lady Penwood certainly does, and that's when it clicks with her. That's when she realizes that it was Sophie at the ball who bumped into her, and it's Sophie who's the one that Benedict is looking for. So later that day, she confronts her. She tells her that she knows that it was Sophie who was the one at the ball. She borrowed the clothes and all of that, and Sophie admits to it. Yeah, okay, it was me. I mean, you're going to punish me. What are you going to do? But then they really, really get into it. I mean, they really get personal. Araminta pointing out that she's done everything for Sophie. She put a roof over her head, and Sophie's like, you're kidding me, right? Like, I've been suffering under you. I mean, you don't like me. You never liked me. You've always been cold to me. Why don't you just get rid of me? Finally, Araminta says, okay, fine. You're fired. It's a big surprise to everybody in the household. The other staff members scrounge together some money so that Araminta can get to a 1800s version of a Motel 6. Posey actually comes down and hands her some jewelry so that she'll be able to sell it. But then you've got Rosamond, who's just a straight-up bitch. Either way, Sophie is cast off in the streets of London to fend for herself. And she just wants to get as far away from London as possible, and where she ends up is in the countryside working at another estate. For Benedict, though, he's just left wondering what's next. I mean, he really thought that this mystery woman could be, possibly, the one. He heads out to the swing set, where he's joined by Eloise, who's somebody he hasn't really talked to since he quote-unquote fired her. And she took great offense to that. One of the things that she was upset about was the fact that she really thought her brother was in lockstep with her regarding marriage, but clearly he wasn't. But the conversation then goes to the fact that Benedict thought he found his person, and he says, clearly she didn't want me. I mean, why would she? To which Eloise says, why wouldn't she? And Benedict points out his bad reputation. He eventually stands up and says, I need to clear my head, which is code for I'm going to go drink my face off. And Eloise says, don't leave me with Mother. But Benedict says, she might surprise you. And then he goes to drink his face off. He does so at a house in the countryside. And as he's drinking, he stumbles outside to get some air, but he overhears a commotion going on. And when he goes to investigate, it's a commotion between a bunch of the guys and a maid. They're harassing her. So Benedict goes to step in, but before he can, there's another maid that steps in for him. She throws water in the guy's face, and she tells the maid who is getting accosted, go, lock yourself in your room so she's safe. However, now, this other maid is not safe, and she's thrown to the ground, and that is not okay with Benedict. He steps in. He fights the guy off. It looks like at one point he actually gets cut by a broken glass, but at the end of it, the guy who was being an asshole is forced to apologize to the maid, or else Benedict would have beaten the shit out of him. And of course, this maid just so happens to be Sophie, who thanks Benedict by name, and he looks at her and says, have we met? And Sophie, realizing that, well, they really shouldn't go down this path, just lies and says, no, we haven't. But then she starts walking off into the dark. Benedict asks, where are you going? And she says, well, I'm going to get fired from this job. I have to find another one. And Benedict tells her, I'll find you a job. And it takes a lot of convincing, with Benedict saying, I'm not going to lay a hand on you, don't worry, but I can't have you walking out into the darkness. Come with me. And as he leads Sophie into his carriage, he once again realizes that there's something between them. He just has a feeling that they've met before, and he once again asks her, but she says, no. And then finally there was a lot of drama going on at the castle. The Queen and Lady Danbury met for a chess match, but Lady Danbury wanted to discuss the events that happened at the Bridgerton ball, with her not being allowed to leave society. However, the Queen wasn't interested in doing it, and the Queen showed how cold-hearted she can be when one of her staff members comes to her and asks her for essentially time off because she's pregnant. And the queen says, oh, no, you can have it, but you won't have a job when you get back. The queen is so self-absorbed and she can only think about herself that she can't let this poor girl go and have a baby. And that's kind of the final straw for Lady Danbury. She gets so upset about this that she just leaves. And for the queen, she can't figure out why. And for days and weeks, it's like the queen lost a limb because she lost her best friend. She tries to confide in Brimsley about certain topics, but everything he says is just not the right thing. It gets to the point where Brimsley actually approaches Lady Danbury and says, please, God, come back. Just apologize, even if it's not your fault, please. So that's exactly what Lady Danbury does. She comes back and apologizes, but she asks the queen, why can't I leave? And this sparks an even bigger fight between the two. One where the queen reminds Lady Danbury, I am your queen, to which Lady Danbury says, oh, I'm just your subject? And the queen says, yes, you are my subject. Silly Lady Danbury. She just thought they were friends up until this point. Guess not. Lady Danbury is so insulted she goes to leave, but to her surprise, the queen apologizes. It's at this moment the queen realizes she's crossed a line. And that's when she confides in Lady Danbury that the reason she doesn't want her to leave society is because Lady Danbury is her only friend. And she doesn't know what's going to happen when George dies. She doesn't like the idea of Lady Danbury not being there. But Lady Danbury assures her, I'm always going to be here for you. And the two women cry it out. In episode 3, Benedict and Sophie start making their way back towards London, but it's going to take a few hours because they're traveling by horse. And Sophie isn't saying a word, which Benedict calls her on. He's like, if we're going to spend this entire trip and you're not going to talk, it's going to take an eternity. But she gives him a lot of sass right back, and she mentions how it's going to rain, which Benedict doesn't believe, but sure enough, about 2 seconds later, they start getting pelted with raindrops. Benedict says, hey, not to worry, my cottage isn't too far away, we'll just hunker down there and stay the night. But when they arrive, it's far from a cottage. It's a mansion. The only issue is when they arrive, the Crabtrees, the people that are servants for the household, they kind of take care of the place, they're nowhere to be found, and Benedict is locked out. Luckily, Sophie knows a way in. She just lifts up the window and hops in and goes inside and unlocks the door, which Benedict is super impressed by, and Sophie says, yeah, servants can be pretty resourceful. When they go inside, you realize just how clueless Benedict is. They try to light a fire, and Benedict is just horrible at it, and Sophie has to do it for him. But those aren't the only flames that are being stoked, if you know what I mean. Sophie kind of stops herself from just staring into Benedict's dreamy eyes and says, all right, where are the servants' rooms? But Benedict says, no, you're not going to stay there. First of all, the Crabtrees stay there, and they won't take kindly to it if they come back, but you're going to stay in the guest room. And Sophie kind of pushes back on it, but Benedict is insistent. No, you're staying there. When they get up to the guest room, he makes mention that she can wear anything in the wardrobe, and she's blown away by the beautiful dresses, but she stops herself and says, no, I can't. There's a lady of the household. It wouldn't be right. But Benedict laughs and says, those are my sisters, and they're old, so they're not going to mind. Just wear what you want. And she reluctantly says, okay, thank you. But Benedict is laboring. He's playing it off like he's not that badly injured, but Sophie can tell that he is struggling a bit. And he says, yeah, you know what, I must have hurt something when I was in that fight, but it's nothing. However, in the middle of the night, Sophie wakes up because Benedict is screaming in pain. And when she goes to the bedroom, she looks, and he is badly injured. He's burning up, and Sophie immediately jumps into action. She starts tending to the wound, and she makes sure that he lives through the night. But the next morning, the Crabtrees do arrive back. And for them, they see Benedict in bed. They see this random girl dressed up in Benedict's sister's dresses, and it doesn't look exactly right. But Benedict tells them exactly what happened, how Sophie actually helped him in the middle of the night, and because of it, she is his guest. She will be treated as such. She will not be treated like help or a maid or any of that. Benedict makes it very clear to Mrs. Crabtree that Sophie is not one of his flings. He helped her, and she helped him. But when he gets up to go leave, Mrs. Crabtree says, you're not going anywhere. No, you're not going anywhere until you're 100%. You're clearly not 100%. You are staying here, and you will be mended back to health. And even though Benedict doesn't want to do that, he doesn't really have a choice. He's known the Crabtrees since he was a little boy, and Mrs. Crabtree is kind of like a second mom to him, so he's going to listen, which means that Sophie is also stuck there. Mrs. Crabtree then jumps into action, getting Sophie a new dress that she can wear throughout the day, but she also notices that Sophie's wearing a really, really nice necklace, and she comments on it, asking if there's a story behind it. But Sophie just says no. She then has to get ready for breakfast, which she's going to do with Benedict in his bedroom. Benedict in bed, Sophie at the table, and the Crabtree is just making sure everything is copacetic. For Sophie, she hasn't had a meal like this in a long time. So she goes to town on it, and Benedict finds it absolutely adorable. But when the meal is done, Sophie gets up to help out Mrs. Crabtree, and Benedict says, "No, you are my guest. What, can you not, relax a bit?" And Sophie kind of takes offense and says, "No, I know how to relax," but it's clear she doesn't. Benedict instructs her, "You need to relax and enjoy your time here." So Sophie does that. She goes out to the garden. She tries to enjoy her time, but she ends up muddying up the dress that she's wearing, and she's pretty embarrassed about it. Not aware of the fact that Benedict is watching from his bedroom window, finding her absolutely adorable. Later that night, as Sophie continues to quote-unquote relax, she travels through the household, and she finds Benedict in his study, where he keeps his art supplies and all of his books. This is a good opportunity for each one to get to know each other. Sophie revealing that she does know how to read because, as she puts it, the first family she worked for allowed her to sit in on the children's lessons. Benedict, embarrassingly having to show off his art, which Sophie seems to enjoy, but she also knows a lot about art, which comes as a surprise to Benedict. Because, as he puts it, you don't find many maids who know a lot about art, they know how to read, but then she takes it one step further. She tries to leave and say goodnight, and she just randomly grabs a book to take with her. And he stops her and says, "Sophie, that's my French book from, middle school." And she starts speaking French, which is shocking to him. Sophie actually starts making fun of the fact that he can't really pronunciate the words properly, and they do end up getting kind of close as she's trying to help him out, but they get interrupted by Mr. Crabtree. Complete cockblock. Sophie ends up excusing herself and saying goodnight, Mr. Bridgerton, but Benedict just wants her to call him Benedict. The next morning, though, Sophie reverts back to her old habits, which is hanging out with the waitstaff, and in particular, Mrs. Crabtree. Sophie wants to leave. She wants to get on top of finding a job, but Mrs. Crabtree says, "Mr. Bridgerton has already sent word to try to get you and your friend a job, and he will find you jobs, so don't even worry about it." But Sophie starts talking about Benedict, and finally Mrs. Crabtree says, "Has he been improper with you?" And Sophie says, "Oh, God, no, it's actually been the exact opposite." Mrs. Crabtree's advice is that Benedict is very kind, but it's important to remember your place. However, Mr. Bridgerton is bored out of his mind. Benedict has been laying in bed, waiting to get the okay that he can leave, and finally decides, I got to do something. So he gets up, and he starts looking throughout the house for something to do. Sophie ends up seeing him, and he says, "You're either coming with me as an accomplice, or you're going to sit here and you're going to get yelled at. It's one or the other," so she decides to come with him, and they fly a kite. There's a lot more flirting. They both have fun, but they're both seen by the Crabtrees, who notice the way that they're interacting. They're interacting as if they like each other. And Mrs. Crabtree especially is worried about this because there is a dynamic here. The dynamic of Mr. Bridgerton and then the waitstaff. She's really just worried for Sophie. The next time, though, Benedict and Sophie run into each other is in the lake. Sophie was taking a walk and noticed Benedict swimming, naked, mind you. Sophie wanted to take a peek, but she was also embarrassed, so she hid behind a tree. But she couldn't resist taking more peeks. Yeah, you get the idea. Eventually, though, Benedict realized somebody was watching him, and he started yelling, "All right, who's there?" only to find Sophie. At this point, by the way, he was wearing pants. He starts flirtatiously saying that she must have followed him there, Sophie denying it all the way. They start kind of bickering a lot in the way that Antony and Kate bickered until finally they get really close, and Benedict says, "So you didn't notice me?" And she says, "I can't help but notice you," and then they finally kiss. They do stop themselves, though. They're like little giddy school kids, and they head back to the house. And when they arrive back at the house, it's obvious to Mrs. Crabtree that something happened between these two. So at this point, she can't hold her tongue anymore. As she's tending to Benedict's wound that night, she brings up the fact that there is this power dynamic, and what she's worried about is that Sophie, being a maid, has no choice but to give in to Benedict's desires. Now, even though Benedict and Sophie both want this, neither of them really truly know that. So for Benedict, now he's questioning things, and he's questioning whether or not he just took advantage of Sophie. He doesn't want to be that guy. So the next morning, as he's painting and Sophie walks in the room, he apologizes, saying it was a mistake and he feels really bad about it. And then it finally comes time for them to leave. The next day, Sophie puts on her maid outfit. Benedict puts on his, he just, he wears the same stuff pretty much. And they get on the carriage and they head out back to London under the assumption that what happened at the cabin stays at the cabin. Now, back at London, that's a complete shit show. Because Sophie leaving the Penwood estate was a butterfly effect felt all over the town. Sophie was so good at her job that she was like 4 people. So when she left, Lady Penwood had to hire 4 new people just to replace Sophie. And where do you find other people? Other houses. She started poaching maids and servants from other houses, which led other houses to poach other houses, and so on and so forth. Suddenly, there was this arms race for help. Now, it was great for the help. I mean, their wages went up, and they were getting enticed to leave. For the Bridgerton household, it didn't even matter because they treat their staff very, very well. However, for the Featherington household, it's a different story. Now, Lady Featherington thought that she treated Varley very, very well. In fact, she kept using the word family. But when Varley brought up the fact that she got offered more money to go someplace else, she gave Lady Featherington the option of matching. Because Varley's living paycheck to paycheck. And Lady Featherington thought about it, but she decided, no, I'm sorry, I can't do it. And the excuse she gave was, if I pay you more money, I have to pay everybody more money. But she also wanted to show her appreciation for Varley, so what did she do? She re-gifted old dresses that she had. And don't get me wrong, Varley appreciated it, but she still wants dead presidents, you know what I mean? So eventually this came to a headway. Varley telling Lady Featherington, look, you use the word family, but at the end of the day, I'm not your family. I'm your servant. I'm your help. And I love being in this house. I love helping your family. I love my job. But I need to feel appreciated. And Lady Featherington is so turned off by this that she actually fired Varley. Although Lady Featherington isn't the only person who's delusional. The Queen had no idea she even had help. Brimsley has to bring up the fact, we have like hundreds, but they're all happy, don't worry. No, what the Queen's concerned about is her ladies-in-waiting, which are kind of like a fancy way of saying friends, although she doesn't have any other than Lady Danbury. Lady Danbury ends up venting about this to Alice Mondrich, and to Alice it's become clear that the ladies-in-waiting that the Queen does have, the Queen just doesn't enjoy them, so how are they useful? And that falls on Lady Danbury because she needs somebody to fill her shoes. So now it's on Lady Danbury to kind of find her replacement for the Queen. She ends up bringing this up to the Queen, and the Queen kind of looks at her like, you can try, but trust me, you're going to fail. But Lady Danbury's hell-bent on finding somebody to fill her shoes. Then you got Francesca, who has consensual, mind you, sex with John, her husband, but she's concerned about the fact that she's not pregnant yet. She brings it up to John, and John says, well, I've heard it's easy if you reach your pinnacle. You're reaching your pinnacle, right? And even though Francesca says, oh, yeah, I am, it's pretty clear she is not. And folks, what I'm talking about is an orgasm, if you haven't figured that out. So for the next few days, Francesca tries to find out from people what the hell a pinnacle is. And finally, she's able to get Penelope to sit down with her and actually explain what an orgasm truly feels like, to which she realizes, oh, no, I've never had one of those before. But they get interrupted when the new spinster in town, Eloise, steps in the room. And it's an uncomfortable conversation, so they don't continue it. They kind of just joke around. But that whole thing about Eloise being a spinster, she might be having second thoughts. Because her mom gives her some good news. I didn't RSVP to the next ball on your behalf, but you do have to accompany Hyacinth to her society lessons. And the society lessons are like who sits at the table, what to wear, forks, knives, that sort of thing. And that's exactly what they go through, where people sit at the table. And when Eloise realizes that the spinsters sit alone and they're looked at as gray and old and washed, it's got her thinking, maybe this isn't so much for me. Because it's not really appealing. But Benedict Bridgerton wasn't the only Bridgerton to get some action. No. Violet Bridgerton went over to Marcus's place. And they finally hooked up. I mean, they kissed. And it was something that Violet was really nervous about, and she trauma dumped all over Marcus about how she was concerned and her body type and her former husband was the last person she'd been with and blah, 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 blah. And it didn't matter. Marcus still wanted that ass. So they finally stopped playing eye tag with each other and they finally kissed, which, it's cool. In episode 4, when Benedict and Sophie arrive back in town, Sophie starts questioning where exactly she's going to work, and Benedict is really coy with it because he wasn't able to actually find her a gig. So he figured, you'll just work at my house. But this is completely unacceptable to Sophie. She doesn't want to work for Benedict. She doesn't want to work for the family. She starts storming off, but Benedict explains, look, I don't know what happened at your former employer, but nobody wants to hire you. Like, I asked, and I have connections, but somebody has besmirched your name. So, look, I'm not even really going to be here that much. We're not going to run into each other. Why exactly are you fighting this so bad? And eventually, she does give in. She accepts the job, or at least she thinks, because when they go in the house, Benedict sees his mom and says, oh, did you get my letter about hiring Sophie? And she says, yeah, but you left before you got mine. This girl's not trustworthy. And that's when Benedict shows his mother the injury that Sophie healed back up. He explains, she saved my life. We need to find a position for her. And as soon as Violet hears that Sophie saved his life, her mood completely changes. She says, no, yeah, we do. We need to find a job for her. We'll figure something out. And they do find something for Sophie to do. It's going to be on a temporary basis, but basically she's going to be taking care of Eloise and Hyacinth. Now that Benedict is back home, though, and he had that tiny fling with Sophie, he wants to try to find his mystery girl again. He tells his mother about this, and she's excited because she wants him to marry. So he wants his mom to put the word out there that he is, again, looking for her, giving the description and all that. His mom then lets him know that Sophie has really acclimated nicely into the household. She's basically beloved in a short period of time because she goes above and beyond. And Benedict says, great, there's the other maid that I told you about. She's more than capable as well, and that is Sophie's friend from the house in the countryside that was getting accosted. So Lady Bridgerton is going to bring her in as well. A few days later, Hazel shows up, and for Sophie, she's thrilled. She has a friendly face. Not that the other staff members haven't been friendly to Sophie. They've been great. But then Sophie wins over the hardest member of the household, Eloise. She does this while Eloise and Hyacinth are having a conversation about art or, I don't know, something like that. And Sophie jumps in, showing that she knows about artists and scientists and all of that. And it's super impressive to Eloise. They start comparing books they've read. And because of the fact that Sophie is so well versed in just literature, she wins Eloise over. This is obviously a big relief to Lady Bridgerton, but she needs another kind of relief, a relief that only Marcus can give her, a relief in her loins. She calls the head of the staff and lets her know that she wishes to have a tea party, late at night, alone. Children need to be out of the house. So they start scheming for this, and the easiest way to do this is to have Francesca and John host a party where the day of, Violet will say, oh, I don't feel well. Marcus comes over and they do the damn thing. So now it's on Violet to really hammer home that Francesca needs to host the family in order to get that alone time. Now, right down the hall, Benedict finally does end up running into Sophie. They haven't really run into each other too much. They've kind of been avoiding one another, but now they're face to face. And he asks her, hey, are you still mad at me for dragging you here? And she admits, no, I'm not. Everyone's been great. The family's been great. I actually really like it. And thank you so much for hiring Hazel. The whole time, though, Benedict is fidgeting with a button that he can't quite get. Sophie asks him if he's getting ready to go to the party at Lady Danbury's that night, but he says, no, it's only for the ladies. And the way he says it, she questions whether or not he likes Lady Danbury, and he says, no, I do, but, you brought up feeling comfortable in society, and he doesn't come right out and say the fact that he's not comfortable with these things, but you can read between the lines. She then helps him with that button. They get real close. They don't kiss, but boy, there's some sexual tension going on. No, instead that night, he goes to a social club for guys. He's hanging out with everybody. They're all talking about different people taking mistresses because one of the people that Benedict knows fell in love with his mistress. So it's got Benedict thinking that maybe you marry out of society. Down the street, though, at Danbury's, there's just a lot of gossip going around about the latest Whistledown pamphlet, which is funny because Penelope is there. Most of the conversation is regarding Benedict and this search for this mystery woman, which Alice Mondrich says, I'll get on the case. And then the party wraps up. The next day, though, Lady Bridgerton decides to call Sophie to have tea with her. She's been meaning to thank her for saving Benedict's life, but she also wants to offer her a full-time position. She tells Sophie, you won over the hardest Bridgerton to win over. And Sophie really hopes that she's talking about Benedict. She gets a little disappointed when Lady Bridgerton says, Eloise. But the point is that Sophie has really acclimated nicely to the household. Everybody loves her. They want her to stay on. And she says, yeah, I'll consider it. After the cake and tea session with Sophie, Lady Bridgerton goes and meets with Lady Danbury. She starts telling Danbury how there's something about Sophie. She just wants to protect her. All this bad juju in the streets about how bad she was, it's not the case. But Lady Danbury also has an issue. She asks Violet, hey, I want to do something for Alice Mondrich, but reality is it would be good for me. Should I do that? And Violet tells her, I've had this same problem. Like, do I do something, but I actually really want it too, and it would be benefiting me? And what she's talking about is Marcus, the struggle of moving on from her husband. Or at least that's the perception. But what Violet tells Lady Danbury is, yeah, do it. Because what Lady Danbury wants to do is have Alice Mondrich be the new Lady Danbury. And she knows that Alice doesn't want to do that, but it would be best for her. For society, for the Queen, for everybody. Alice would fight it, but eventually she would see the light. So she's going to have to find the right time to do it. That night, though, there was another run-in between Sophie and Benedict. Sophie was staring at the stars. Benedict walked by. He told her, I'll leave, but she said, no, I'm just looking at the stars. Again, there's a lot of sexual tension. Sophie goes to excuse herself. Benedict stops her, and he tells her, I don't want you to go. And that's when she brings up the fact that she was offered a permanent position. And her whole life, she's wanted to be a part of a family like this. But she says, I don't know if it's wise for me to stay. And the whole time, Benedict is getting closer and closer to her lips. He tells her, if you want to stay, I don't want to jeopardize that for you. And then they go their separate ways. That night, though, all the sexual tension finally builds up and Sophie can't take it anymore. Damn it, she's going to reach her pinnacle. At least you thought so at one point. I mean, she starts going to town down there, but then she just stops. I mean, it's a buzzkill. The next day, though, word comes down from Alice Mondrich that she might have found Benedict's mystery woman. She sends word to Lady Bridgerton on who this girl might be. It's one of her neighbors. But she also gets dragged in front of the Queen by Lady Danbury. Because this, unknowingly of course, is Alice's chance to show what she could be as the lady-in-waiting. She tells the Queen what she knows, and the Queen gives her blessing. Yeah, all right, she could be my new lady-in-waiting. And when she says that, Alice's face changes because this isn't what she wanted. She can't show that openly to the Queen, but she leaves and she's pissed. And it gets to the point where Lady Danbury has to go over to the Mondrich household where Alice's husband is like, I don't know what the hell's going on. But Danbury has to talk some sense into Alice, saying, this is how you become friends with the Queen. Look, you're the only one who can do this. You're the only one who could replace me, who can tell her when she's wrong. So you need to take the job. And this little pep talk does seem to work. It seems like Alice's mind has switched. But unfortunately, Alice's tip, it isn't it. Now, the girl that Alice thought was Benedict's mystery woman comes over. She has tea along with her mother, Benedict, and Violet. But the more that Benedict talks to her, the more he realizes, yeah, it's not her. And the clincher is when she says she wasn't even at the ball that night. But what really throws Benedict off is when Sophie walks in. Because Sophie is not supposed to be doing that particular position. And he feels uncomfortable having Sophie watch him with other girls. He doesn't quite know what to do. He covers his teacup so that she can't pour any tea into it. She accidentally does all over his hand. It burns him. There's a whole scene. But when they're alone, he apologizes. He tries to help her clean it up. And she's clearly upset about it. She tells him it's not a problem. You're an eligible bachelor. This is what you're supposed to do. I'm a maid. I'm supposed to clean up, right? And he says, well, you shouldn't have to witness it. But she shoots back, it is not helpful when you say things like that. This conversation gets really emotional between the two. At one point, Benedict says, I'm not interested in that woman. She could never compare. With Sophie shooting back, compare to what? I mean, why are you always here? Everywhere I turn, here you are. This is the best position I've ever had, but I can't stay here if you're living here. He offers up that maybe he could spend time somewhere else for the time being if she would be more comfortable, and she says, yeah, that'd be great. As Sophie is leaving, she turns back and says, you really should pursue something with that woman. Miss Hollis, she seems delightful. A few hours later, she watches as Benedict packs up his stuff and heads off to basically a bachelor pad. That night, though, most of the staff is off because it's supposed to be Violet's night with Marcus, which also means that it's Francesca's night and John's night to host the family. Before they do that, they start fooling around, and Francesca puts on an acting job to show John that he's doing it right, but John knows, yeah, that's you're faking it. And they have a whole conversation about sex. I don't know. I don't really know what's accomplished with it other than the fact that John knows that she's never orgasmed. A little while later, though, the family comes over, brothers and sisters. Hyacinth starts excitedly saying that she can't wait to host one of these parties, and Eloise, who has been getting dragged to her lessons, finally says, I can't take this anymore. Could you please stop talking about that stuff? And Hyacinth has had enough. She looks at Eloise and says, I used to think you just hated me, but now I'm starting to think you're just in love with yourself. The party, though, then gets word that they're having another guest, an unexpected one. John and Francesca go out to see who it is, and it's John's cousin, Michaela. Michaela has shown up, and while John's excited, it doesn't seem like Francesca's excited at all. Seems like something must have happened back in Scotland. Meanwhile, down the street at the Bridgerton household, Marcus shows up, and then he lays the wood, shows her that lap hog, and she wanted it. It was consensual, it was hot, it was steamy, it was spicy. Although you have to remember, Bridgerton household is massive. So the staff that leave for the night, that includes Sophie, they have no idea what's going on in one bedroom. They just leave. But Sophie realizes, oh crap, I forgot my coin purse. I got to go back in. She doesn't know that Benedict has come back to the house to talk to her. And they run into each other. It doesn't take long for lips to be locked. They start making out. It gets real heavy. Fingers start traveling. But Benedict then ruins it all. Because he tells Sophie, I want you to be my mistress. And that's something that Sophie's clearly not interested in at all. So she leaves. Leaves Benedict dumbfounded and confused. Episode 5 starts out with a letter from Benedict to Sophie saying, hey, I need an answer. He really wants to meet with her. She has no interest in that. She needs to tell somebody about all of this, and when she goes to the market, she runs into a pretty familiar face, a guy that she used to work with at the Penwood estate, a guy named Alfie. She tells him all of it. I mean, the whole deal about her moving to the country, working at a house, getting saved by Benedict, going to his summer cottage, getting the job at the Bridgerton household, the whole thing, including hooking up with him. And when she says the part about being his mistress, Alfie's like, that sounds great. I mean, every guy in town has a mistress, and it would basically require you to do nothing but keep him happy. But Sophie makes it known she doesn't want that at all. It's gotten to the point where she's actually looking for another place to work. And Alfie says, there's an opening at the new Lady Penwood's place, and we'd love to have you home, but unfortunately, the old Lady Penwood, she's kind of sullied your reputation in town. But Sophie's not worried about that. She knows that a letter of recommendation from Lady Bridgerton would go a long way. But this old Penwood thing needs to get brought up. Because when Lady Penwood, the old one at least, when her husband died, his cousin took over the name of Lord Penwood. But he was more of a country guy, and Lady Penwood was more of a city girl, so he kind of just let her do her own thing in the city. And by do her own thing, it meant raising the two daughters and treating Sophie like scum. But since then, Lord Penwood has taken a new wife. She's the new Lady Penwood. And they have moved into the old Penwood estate, the one that Sophie used to work at. That's why Alfie said, it'd be great to have you back. As for the old Lady Penwood, who's now going by Anaminta Gunn, her and her two daughters and Farley and the whole crew, they've had to move. Unbeknownst to Sophie, they're moving right next door to the Bridgertons. When it boils down to it, Lord Penwood has no interest in being with Mrs. Gunn. He's essentially kind of paying her off to take her daughters and stay out of his way. And with Lady Gunn no longer living in the old estate, it would be a perfect opportunity for Sophie to move back and get reacclimated with her natural surroundings. Of course, that's not what Benedict wants, and he still wants an answer from Sophie, although he realizes she's playing really hard to get. Just like Sophie, he needs to tell somebody about this. So when Lord Mondrich comes over, he vents to him about the whole situation. He can't quite figure out why Sophie is playing hard to get, why she hasn't answered him. And Lord Mondrich is like, bro, are you kidding me? Nobody wants to be a mistress. I mean, nobody wants to be hidden. Did you tell her how you actually feel, or did you just say, hey, I want you to be my mistress? Because, yeah, that's probably why she's ignoring you. And Benedict realizes, okay, I maybe have fumbled this whole thing. I didn't quite word it the way I wanted to. It's going to require Benedict to do some backtracking in order to get the proper response he wants from Sophie. The Benedict situation, however, is still at the top of the mind for the Queen, which is where Lady Mondrich is. Alice is getting her first introduction as lady-in-waiting for the Queen, a role that the Queen and Alice aren't really comfortable with because both are just used to Lady Danbury taking on the role. Alice has no interest in it, even though it'll help her career, and the Queen has no interest in it because she's just accustomed to having Lady Danbury do everything. But Lady Danbury is steadfast. No. I'm stepping back. This is my protege. It will work. So when the Queen asked for an update on Benedict and whether or not Alice's recommendation was right about the neighbor being the mystery woman, Alice doesn't have an answer, and Lady Danbury doesn't have an answer. And even though both the Queen and Alice would just like Lady Danbury to do her own thing and find out whether or not Benedict was in fact smitten with the neighbor, Lady Danbury is adamant, no. Alice, this is your job now. You're doing it. Of course, it wasn't the neighbor. It was Sophie, who returned to Bridgerton House later that day in order to get ready for a recital being hosted by Hyacinth. This is the soft approach for people that are almost ready to be introduced into society. Think of it like a practice round. And Hyacinth is really excited about it, although extremely nervous about it. One person she does not want there, though, is her sister. She doesn't want Eloise anywhere near her because there's still bad blood about what happened. And even though Eloise does feel bad about it and she does care about her sister's future, well, there's no convincing Hyacinth of that. And now normally Eloise wouldn't care, but when Violet says, oh, you don't remember our agreement? If you're not sitting in on Hyacinth's finishing lessons, then you are brought back out into society. Like, that's what we agreed upon. And that's when Eloise starts trying to really do damage control and fix this relationship with Hyacinth so that she doesn't have to go back out in society and have awkward conversations with eligible bachelors. As both girls storm out of the room, Sophie takes her opportunity to talk to Violet. She thanks her, and she says she really appreciates everything that the Bridgertons have done for her, but she wants a letter of recommendation. This blindsides Violet. And even though Sophie says, nothing's wrong, I just think it's time to move on, I have an opportunity to go back where I came from, it's puzzling to Violet. So she gives Sophie a test. Sophie had told everybody that she grew up in a place called Aylesbury. It's a place that's famous for its doves, but the test that Violet gives Sophie is by saying, oh, that place is famous for its owls, correct? And Sophie fails. She just agrees with Violet, which sparks even more alarm bells. So after telling Sophie, I'll write your letter of recommendation, Violet goes over to Mrs. Wilson, the head of all the servants, and says, have you ever gotten the impression that Sophie isn't telling us the full story? It's not like Lady Bridgerton thinks that Sophie murdered somebody or anything, but she's thinking that with her educational background, she might come from nobility and she's hiding it. So she tasks Mrs. Wilson to try to find out what she can about Sophie's background before Lady Bridgerton writes this letter of recommendation and loses her forever. Meanwhile, Sophie had left to accompany Eloise and Francesca out so that they can go shopping. When her worst fears came true, she runs into Benedict. It wasn't by accident, but Benedict needed an answer. He also really needed to talk to her. And after Benedict excuses both of his sisters to go shop on their own, he finally gets his opportunity. He apologizes, and she says, yeah, no, what we did was inappropriate. Sophie tries really hard to put on this strong act that it was a mistake and she didn't want it and she regrets it. But when she looks in Benedict's eyes, it's the exact opposite. I mean, she's in love with the dude, even though she doesn't want to admit it to herself. Eventually, she snaps out of it and she gives him an answer, saying, you don't know me at all if you think I'm going to be your mistress. And then she excuses herself. A little shell-shocked, Benedict heads over to a club where he runs into a familiar face. It's the guy that he's friends with that took up a mistress but was way too public about it. And unfortunately for this guy, even though he fell in love with his mistress, the news got out. And by the news getting out, I mean Whistledown wrote about it. It was the worst kept secret in town, but when Whistledown writes about it, that secret becomes truth. Now it's out in the open. And because of it, this guy had to end the relationship with the girl that he really loved. It's killing him. And as Benedict is watching his friend just spiral down the drain, he's realizing, yeah, being in love with your mistress, it's got its drawbacks. Benedict had plans on day drinking, but instead, he spends a little time there and then he heads back home. He needs, again, to talk to Sophie. He finds her in his study, where she was admiring some of the paintings that he was doing regarding the mystery girl from the ball. Benedict catches her in the act, but she says, oh, I was just cleaning. But she does ask about this mystery woman in the paintings, and Benedict, unaware of the fact that Sophie is that girl, just says, yeah, I was infatuated with her, but now I'm not, because I'm infatuated with you. He reiterates that it's Sophie who he really wants, and he goes in to kiss her, but she kind of pulls back a little bit. She starts chastising him again for asking her the question of being his mistress, saying, you're taking away my dignity by doing that. She lets him know that as a maid, she's respectable, but now, by doing what he's doing, he's ripping her of that. Of course, that's not his intention. He apologizes and he just leaves. The next morning when Benedict wakes up, he goes and he has plans on day drinking. He wants to invite Colin, but Colin and Gregory are actually entertaining guests. They have a few friends over as they just eat cheese. That's what rich people do back then. They just ate cheese. And Benedict decides to join in for a bit because Gregory is planning on attending Hyacinth's party later that day, and he's got a lot of questions about relationships. Benedict at first starts answering them, but Gregory says, I appreciate it, but like you haven't married yet. I mean, you haven't even come close. So with no experience in the matter, I'm going to listen to these guys. It's humbling for Benedict, but Gregory is right, and Benedict actually gleans something from this. When Gregory asks the group, I mean, what am I supposed to do? Like, how do I know if she's interested? And Colin says, you just have to do what Anthony told me to do. You have to be brave. You have to tell her how you feel. It's an eye-opening moment for Benedict. Gregory, however, needs to get ready for the ball that night, as does Benedict, because he is Hyacinth's chaperone. Hyacinth is on edge, making sure everything is planned accordingly and perfect. But before they start welcoming guests, Violet takes both Hyacinth and Gregory aside and says, I'm just going to let you guys know I'm having a guest tonight. His name is Lord Anderson. He's a friend. She's extremely nervous about this, but she's decided, well, we already slept together. We might as well make this thing semi-public. So she'll have a date. It's not like both Gregory or Hyacinth really care. Hyacinth's more concerned about the party going well, while her sister, Eloise, is worried about the relationship and mending it. She tries one last-ditch effort to make good, but Hyacinth is just not interested. So it looks like Eloise is going to have to be thrown back out in society. As everybody exits the room, it leaves Mrs. Williams and Violet alone, and Mrs. Williams did do some digging, and she found out that one of the maids worked with a woman who shared Sophie's last name, and she figures it must have been Sophie's mother. So the way that Mrs. Williams figures, Sophie probably does come from nobility. She was just the illegitimate child of a lord. Oh, by the way, she came from London. This is disappointing to Violet, who lets it slip that she was hoping Sophie was legitimate so that she would be suitable, and she cuts herself off. She doesn't finish the sentence, suitable for Benedict, even though that's exactly what she meant. Although Mrs. Williams wasn't the only one to gather some information regarding Sophie's background. Farley was also at the market. She was also gossiping with the other heads of the households. She's had a tough go of it dealing with Lady Gunn. Lady Gunn, by the way, is still trying to sully Sophie's good name by saying that she stole a crate of shoes. But that same night, right next door, Lady Gunn actually tries to fire Farley. And firing housekeepers is what Lady Gunn is best at, but Farley, that's a different situation. And Farley actually pushes back on this by saying, well, yeah, I was at the market late because I was trying to find out information on your old housekeeper, Sophie, and I did. She's working at the Bridgerton household next door. So it looks like Farley will not be fired. But next door, the ball goes on for the preteens. For Gregory and Hyacinth, they're very nervous. They've got people there to support them, like Colin, like Benedict. Although Benedict has his eyes set on Sophie. Sophie trying to avoid Benedict's gaze. You've also got the Mondriches there, who have their son in attendance, although they're really there so that Alice can garner intel and try and do her best Lady Danbury. As the kids take a little break for refreshments, Lady Bridgerton cozies up to Lord Anderson, which is something that Benedict notices. Eloise is approached by a bunch of bachelors and gets a look from her mother like, yeah, no, look presentable. And she tries her best, but she's still uncomfortable. And Benedict, he ends up going up to Sophie. He makes it look like he's just looking at the table, and when Sophie says, are you looking for something, he just says, yeah, I've already found it. Although he's interrupted when there's an announcement made that all the kids need to grab their chaperones so that they can dance. So Benedict heads onto the dance floor, he starts dancing with Hyacinth, and for Sophie, she can't help but smile. Although that smile is quickly wiped away when she overhears that the new next-door neighbors are her old employers. She starts getting sick to her stomach. She flees the room, and Benedict notices. He goes after her. But Violet notices that Benedict is going after her, and at this point, she can't let it happen. She stops Benedict, and she says, what you're doing is inappropriate. And Benedict fires back and says, oh, and what you're doing with Lord Anderson isn't? I mean, you're bedding a man that isn't your husband, your children are downstairs, you're welcoming it. I mean, look, none of that's my business, but what I'm doing right now, none of that is your business either. And he chases after the love of his life. He ends up catching up to Sophie in a hallway and screaming that they need to talk. They make their conversation a little too public, so much so that Alice Mondrich, who was looking for her son, overhears a lot of it. She gets the gist that the mystery woman is the housekeeper. Of course, those two don't know. They go into a separate room. Sophie tries to play the game of like, we can't be doing this. You're toying with me. And finally, he just comes right out with it and says, I'm in love with you. Like, I can't stop thinking about you. He professes his love for her. She admits that she is also in love with him. And then they have sex. Like, it's hot and stuff. They really get after it. But there are a couple people that aren't at this party that were invited, but they couldn't make it for various reasons. One of them being Penelope. Penelope had written in her most recent article for Lady Whistledown about that relationship regarding the guy that Benedict's friends with and his mistress. As I said, her putting it out in public has, well, it's created some waves that she wasn't ready for. One of the biggest complaints is the fact that she didn't name names. She always names names, but in this case, she didn't. And she thought that was the safest route, but she's getting backlash on both ends. Like, her mother has to put her input in, and the queen is mad about it. But the other person that's really mad about it is the mistress, who comes to the household to confront Penelope. And she starts yelling at her, and Penelope's like, I'm sorry, but everybody already knew. To which the mistress says, yeah, but it wasn't public. I mean, it was a bad kept secret, but now you putting in writing, you made it a thing that I can't come back from. I was saving up money so that eventually when he dumped me for a younger version, I could have a life of my own, but you took that from me. And it's something that Penelope hadn't thought of. And while she would like to attend the soiree thrown by Hyacinth, she can't because she's brought in front of the queen to answer the question, why didn't you name names? And it's at that point that Penelope says, look, when I started this, it was fun and I love gossip, but now it's not fun anymore. She nicely asked the queen, can I stop writing Whistledown? But the queen looks at her and says, no, you can't stop. Why is everybody asking me to stop what they love to do? So, unfortunately, Penelope has to go back to her house and write the latest edition. The other people that aren't in attendance are John and Francesca, mainly because John is too busy entertaining his cousin Michaela. It's a relationship that Francesca is just not a fan of, and she's having more and more trouble holding her tongue as time goes on. All of this culminates in the fact that they have to entertain Francesca instead of going to Hyacinth's party. Francesca, wanting to find Michaela a husband so that she can get her own husband back to herself, tries to introduce Michaela to an eligible bachelor, but Michaela is not interested and really turned off by it. And John is pissed off at Francesca because he flat out told her, don't do that, but she took it upon herself to do it anyway. The two head into a separate room and they have it out. Francesca is just under a lot of stress. She also doesn't like the fact that she can't elicit the reactions from John the way that Michaela does. It's this weird jealousy that she has for John's cousin, of all people. Michaela, of course, not realizing that Francesca is really going through it, trying to get pregnant, ends up apologizing. The two women make up, and at the end of it, they seem to be in really good spirits and even friends. They say those words, friends. For episode 6, we'll start out in the bedroom of Benedict, where he and Sophie wake up, and Sophie is flipping out a little bit, only because she's worried about the aftermath of all of this. She's not necessarily worried about being Benedict's mistress. She's worried about being pregnant. Even though he swears up and down that he will take care of her if that's the case, and what they have is real, she's got her doubts. So as she sneaks off to her bedroom, the first thing she does when she gets inside of it is write down exactly when her period will be so that she knows, okay, in 8 days, I better be, I better have it, or I'm likely with child, and then I'm stuck as his mistress, which is something she clearly doesn't want. A little while later, though, the rest of Bridgerton house ends up waking up. Violet gets a visit from her boyfriend, but that gets interrupted because the Lady Gunn, we'll just call her Lady Gunn from now on, she's come calling. And this is not the first time that she has tried to get an audience with Lady Bridgerton since moving in next door. She's been especially adamant about this since finding out that Sophie is one of the housekeepers. And that's the real whole reason why she wants to talk to Violet. She wants to sully the name of Sophie yet again, which she does. She sits down with Violet. She brings up how Sophie stole her shoes, and she really just wants to put a bad taste in Violet's mouth, but it doesn't work. Later that day, Violet ends up meeting with Sophie and telling her, yeah, I met with your old boss. I mean, I could tell right away it was your old boss. I don't blame you for not liking that woman. She said that you stole her shoes or something. And Sophie admits, I did, but it's not what it seems. Either way, Violet didn't come there to get a shoe story. She came there to deliver the recommendation that Sophie had requested. At this point, though, Sophie's second-guessing whether or not she really wants it, but she asked for it, and Violet wanted to deliver it just in case. While Lady Gunn wasn't exactly a welcomed visitor, the household does get a welcome visitor when Antony arrives the next day. This was at the behest of his mother. Violet's really worried about Benedict and what's going on with him, and she figured that if she can't get through to him, maybe Antony could. So Antony's arriving before Kate and his little one. He gets the lowdown from Violet on everything that's going on, and then he gets the chance to finally talk to Benedict at one of the clubs. And let me tell you, Antony doesn't beat around the bush. I mean, he comes right out and tells Benedict how foolish he's being. He brings it back to his own situation, saying that while he thought he was in the throes of passion and he thought he was in love with his mistress, he wasn't. And he could never think about bringing a child into the world with a mistress. It was foolish and careless, and that's what he thinks Benedict is doing. But Benedict, of course, being in love with Sophie, pushes back on this. Benedict finally gets so tired of it, he actually gets up and leaves. He can't take it anymore. Antony goes home. He thinks long and hard about what he's going to do, and then he comes up with a solution. He has one of the guys fetch Sophie and meets with him secretly in the garden, where he proposes that the two run off and live in the cottage full time. They'll be out of the spotlight. They'll be able to have their life together. And, if she ends up getting pregnant, they'll have a family. Yeah, they won't be married, but they'll be together. And while it all sounds good on paper, Sophie gets concerned. She looks at him and says, okay, this is a promise, but what happens if you decide to break the promise? I mean, what am I going to do? And he's kind of dumbfounded at that. He's like, Sophie, you think that low of me, that I would make this promise to you and then I would just discard you? And it's not so much that she thinks that low of Benedict, it's the fact that she comes from that very situation. She tells him, I was illegitimate. My mom was a maid. My father was a nobleman. But he swears that would not be the case. If they were to have a child, that child would know one thing, and that is love. And as far as his family goes, he's still working the details out. But he wants to be with Sophie. And he's really, really thought this through. He sent word to the Crabtrees, get the cottage ready. He's even drawn up pictures of it, and he gave it to her, so when she goes to her room, she's beaming as she looks at it, thinking about a life with him. But then she's also reminded, oh yeah, I still haven't gotten my period yet. The next day, though, most of the town is really surprised when they get an invitation to a ball being held by the new Lady Penwood. It's Cressida Cowper. Yeah, she's back in town with a new title, a new husband, a new name, a new house, and the first place she stops is Whistledowns. It's not so much to rub everyone's face in it and do the whole, hey, look, I made it. I married. I'm golden. No, it was kind of to apologize, actually. She apologized to Penelope, and she says, look, I understand that with one quill, you could ruin me. So I'm asking you nicely, can you please come to this ball? It's the first one I'm hosting in the new house. It would really mean a lot to me. And it seems like Penelope is going to show up. I mean, Cressida has no idea that Penelope's thinking about giving up on this whole Whistledown thing. She's desperately trying to get out of the job. But the queen? The queen's pissed off. I mean, she still looks down on Cressida for the stunt that she pulled. And as she's sitting there trying to think of what she's going to do, Alice Mondrich shows her worth. Now, Alice hasn't told the queen yet everything she knows about Benedict. She very well could, but she knows that's not really her place. I mean, yeah, the queen would love that information, but it could ruin the life of this poor maid. So she's kept her mouth shut there. But in this instance, she speaks up and she says, what you could do is you could tell Cressida that you need to have this ball in my name. And then the day of, you just don't show up. I mean, Cressida will tell the entire town, yeah, I'm having the ball in the queen's name, and it's going to look really bad when you just ghost her. And the queen loves that idea. The word, though, of Cressida being the new Lady Penwood is all most of the taunt can talk about. When Kate finally arrives in town, she asks all of her sister-in-laws, all right, give me the gossip. And that's basically the gossip so far. Most of them don't seem to want to go to this ball. The only person that does want to go is Hyacinth, but she's not allowed to. And while Francesca says, can we just all in solidarity stay away from that one? It's actually Kate who says, come on. I mean, doesn't everybody deserve a second chance? The whole conversation gets broken up when Kate and Antony's child gets brought into the room. Just outside of the room, though, is Benedict. He's avoiding going in. He doesn't want to see his mother because the last time they talked, it wasn't a good conversation. And as he's standing outside of the room, Lady Danbury walks up. Those two start chatting. She doesn't believe that Benedict's standing outside because of anything to do with his mother. She says, are you sure you're not standing out here because you've always been the spare son and now you're put out to pasture because of that little child in there? Meaning that if Antony were to die, little Edwin is now the head of Bridgerton House. It wouldn't go to Benedict. And Benedict admits to her, yeah, it's a strange feeling. I mean, I've dreaded this my entire life, seeing a child that makes me essentially useless, but now I don't have that feeling. It's weird. To which Danbury says, yeah, it's called love. He says, no, I don't even, like, I haven't even met the guy. But it's weird. I don't know if it's envy. Yeah, it might be love. And as he's talking it out, he realizes that a child being brought into the world brings people so much joy. So would it be the worst thing in the world if he and Sophie had a baby out of love? That very well might be the case because in the following days, Sophie does not get her period. While most of the taunt is getting ready for Cressida's ball, Sophie's getting ready to mentally prepare herself for motherhood. She does, however, have to continue to do her job, which is assisting both Hyacinth and Eloise, and when Eloise walks into the room the night of Cressida's ball, Hyacinth gives her the same attitude she's been giving her for quite some time now, but Eloise has brought a peace offering. She offers to sneak Hyacinth into the ball. Now, she does have one stipulation. You actually have to talk to me now, but Hyacinth is all for it. And Sophie has a great idea on how to make Hyacinth completely invisible. It's just dress her up as a maid. So that's exactly what she does, and both Eloise and Hyacinth head off to the new Penwood estate. A few hours later, everybody starts arriving at the estate, including, by the way, Lady Gunn and her 2 daughters. They have to stare at the remodeling job that Cressida has done in their old house. And while this should be theoretically awkward for someone like Penelope being at a ball like this, it's not. It is a little awkward, though, when Benedict finally does actually run into his mother there, and they have to talk. He finally apologizes, but his mother really does think that he needs to let Sophie go. And of course, he has no plans on doing that. But everybody from the Taunt seems to be at this ball, including, by the way, John and Francesca. Despite Francesca not wanting to go, she did. And John was happy to accompany her because he was thrilled to wake up and find out that his wife and his cousin are now friends. So he's all smiles. He doesn't really care what the plan is. He's just happy those 2 are getting along. Yeah, the only person not to show up is the Queen. But the surprising guest that shows up is Lady Whistledown. Now, even though Penelope is there in attendance, she had gone to the Queen the previous day to plead her case on letting her out of the Whistledown job. She went and said, look, I can't really do the job you want me to do because now that people know that I'm Whistledown, nobody is talking, especially not around me. And she does it in an eloquent way, and the Queen seems to give her blessing on letting her out of the job. So when Whistledown, quote-unquote, shows up at the ball, it's to interrupt the ball with the latest pamphlet that says, hey, thanks for reading, but I'm done. This is the last one you'll ever read. It takes the shine away from Cressida and the ball, but Cressida also realizes that because this is the last issue, it also means that Whistledown can't write about the embarrassing fact she threw the ball in the Queen's honor and the Queen no-showed. So she's actually kind of appreciative. A little while later, everybody starts packing up. They go home. That includes the Bridgertons. But when Benedict comes back, he is greeted by a very angry Antony, who went into his study, looked at his desk, and realized that Benedict was planning a life with Sophie in, quote-unquote, his cottage. And the 2 start screaming at each other. Antony assuming that Benedict hasn't even thought this out. Benedict saying, oh, yes, I have. Now, while even though through this entire argument, Benedict makes his plea that he's thought this out, he's thought about the good, the bad, what could happen if they brought a child into the world, all of it, Antony is also very passionate that this is the wrong move. That it would be the wrong move not only for Benedict, but the wrong move, more importantly, for the family, and that he can't do this. And what they don't know is that Sophie is on the outside listening to all of it. And while she hears what Benedict is saying, she really listens to what Antony is saying. And for her, it's a giant sign that you will never be welcomed into this family. So she heads back to her room. She takes one last look at that picture of the cottage that Benedict gave her. She throws it in the fire, and she writes to Alfie asking, hey, is that job still available? And the next day, Sophie calls for Benedict to meet with her. She tells him that she's got an interview the next day for the new Penwood house, and if she's offered the position, she's going to take it. This really blindsides Benedict. She really just wanted to meet with him to say goodbye because if she is offered the position, that night would be her last night in the Bridgerton household. And he's confused. He's like, well, what about And she cuts him off and says, I was never with child. I got my period. While relieved, he also says, you don't have to take a new position. Like, I promised you I'd take care of you, and that's still true, whether you're with child or not. She says, I appreciate it, but you don't owe me anything. And he says, this wasn't about owing you. This was about love. And that's when she starts getting emotional, saying, I thought that would be enough. And we both want it to be enough, but it's not enough. What she's realized is that if they were to be together, she would be ripping Benedict from one of the most loving families that she's ever seen. And she just can't do that. He starts trying to offer solutions, but she says no. I mean, eventually we would make the same mistake that we made last time. And he doesn't appreciate the fact she uses the word mistake. He starts getting super emotional. And finally, she just has to push away and run off. Because while she's putting on a strong facade, inside she is breaking down. And when she finally gets into her bedroom, she just starts crying her eyes out. Over at the palace, though, Penelope is called in front of the queen. The queen just wants to know how everything went at Cressida's ball, but the queen also gives her blessing to Penelope that she no longer has to be whistled down. That's not the only blessing she gives, though. She also looks at Lady Danbury, and she doesn't even have to say a word. She just gives her a look indicating you're free to go live your life. And it means the world to Lady Danbury. Unfortunately, though, that night, the taunt does end up losing someone. While spirits were high in Francesca and John's world, Francesca goes to check on John that night only to find that he is dead. He has passed away after taking a nap, and she is shook. But you know what? I'm going to end this episode on a high note. Violet and Lord Anderson get engaged. After one sexual fling, he's decided, yep, this is the one I want to spend the rest of my life with. So she must be an absolute demon in the sack. But he comes over, he proposes, she says yes, it's a very happy moment. In episode 7, the funeral for John goes down and the taunt is distraught. No one saw this coming. Because of the fact that this was so sudden, Sophie has sent word to the new Penwood household that she's going to delay coming over there just to get the Bridgertons in a good space. And then she'll head over to her new assignment. But as for John's widow, Francesca is a mess. I mean, she's trying her best to put on a strong face and distract herself, but it's obvious that she is shook, understandably so, by this loss. And at the moment, I mean, she's got her family, obviously, but the people going through this the most are her and Michaela. They now have each other going through this. When all of this becomes a lot for Francesca, Sophie can sense it, so she takes Francesca aside, creating an excuse, and she lets her know, hey, if you need time alone, just give me a look. I'll know. I know what it's like to lose somebody you love. I lost my father, and the two kind of bond over that. After taking care of Francesca, Sophie ends up heading out to the garden where Benedict is just trying to get a moment to himself. They have a really awkward conversation where they try to act like they're professional. They try to act like they're not in love, but they clearly are. And they clearly have so much sexual tension, but they know they can't act on it. She tries to comfort him. He says, don't worry about it. That's not your job. She says, no, I know. I just want to be there for you. But then it gets into the conversation of when she's leaving. And she lets him know by the end of the week. This conversation is so painful for Benedict, he can't even make eye contact with Sophie. And when it ends, Sophie looks at him and says, goodbye, Mr. Bridgerton. Because she truly doesn't know if this will be the last time they ever talk to each other again. Now, one family that wasn't invited to the funeral was Araminta, Posey, and Rosamond. And for Araminta, she takes it as a huge insult. It's probably for the best because Rosamond has a new suitor. But all Araminta can think about is the fact that Rosamond's suitor is not Benedict Bridgerton. She starts blaming Sophie, and Posey looks at her and says, oh my God, is that why we went over to Bridgerton House the other day, because you were looking for Sophie? Because while Araminta brought up Sophie to Violet, Violet never confirmed that Sophie actually worked there. Araminta didn't see Sophie there. So she's still on the lookout for Sophie, unaware of the fact that she does, in fact, live across the street. For Araminta, the hunt for Sophie will continue. But Sophie's also looking for something. She realized that she has lost her mother's pendant, and she needs to get it back before she leaves for the new Penwood estate. She looks all over for it. She tells the staff what it looks like, and they're going to keep an eye out. Meanwhile, upstairs in Bridgerton House the next day, Penelope and Eloise invite Francesca over to kind of just give her a distraction. They do ask, hey, is Michaela joining us? But she's not. Yeah, the previous night, Michaela and Francesca kind of got into it. Michaela wanting to throw John a more of a sort of celebration of life party because the funeral was such a downer. And she kept pressing and pressing until finally Francesca just snapped. So when she's asked that question, she tells both women, I think that we're just giving each other some space. The way, however, Francesca is holding herself is kind of bizarre to both Penelope and Eloise. And they let her know, look, you're in front of family, like you can vent. That's when she tells them, I'm with child. Yeah, John left me with a gift, just like father left mother with Hyacinth. Both Penelope and Eloise are thrilled for Francesca, but this is going to be a big deal. This affects lineage. Although, because of the fact that this is the 1800s, this is really just an assumption from Francesca. They don't exactly have paternity tests that you can pick up at the local CVS. The talk, however, of Francesca and how she's coping with all of this is really the talk of the taunt. When the Queen meets with Lady Danbury one day before Danbury is supposed to depart, that's the first thing she asks, how's Francesca doing? And Danbury gives the update, but this conversation quickly goes into the fact that the Queen is really going to miss Lady Danbury. I mean, she doesn't come right out and say it. She hides behind things like, oh, it's unfortunate when things change. But Danbury knows what she's talking about. And she lets her friend know, I will write. It's not like you're never going to see me again. But for the Queen, she just doesn't like change. And this is probably the biggest one she's dealt with in a long time. While the Queen is about to deal with the loss of her best friend, Benedict is trying to deal with the loss of the love of his life. He's trying to keep busy by getting John's affairs in order and helping his sister out, but it's tough. And to make matters worse, his mother comes in, she mentions Sophie leaving, and that's the straw that breaks the camel's back for Benedict. He loses it. He yells at his mother, this is ironic. I mean, all you've ever done is tell us as kids about how you want us to have love matches. And I finally find that. I finally find a woman that I love, and I can't marry her because it's not proper for society. And this is taking Violet by complete surprise. She knew her son was into Sophie. She didn't know her son was in love with Sophie. That changes things. She thought what they just had was a mere fling. But no. She can sense in Benedict's eyes and the tone in his voice that this is eating him alive. The fact that he is, in fact, in love with this woman, but he can't be with her because of societal norms. For Violet, there's nothing really she can say that's going to make Benedict happy in this moment, so she lets him vent, but right afterwards, she goes and talks to Sophie. She asks her point blank, are you leaving because of my son Benedict? And that's a surprise to Sophie because she didn't know that Violet knew about their relationship. She starts apologizing and say how inappropriate it was, but Violet lets her know, Sophie, I would love for my son to marry someone just like you, but... And that's the thing. There's a but. And they both know what the but is. After this unfortunate conversation with Sophie, where she does confirm that the feeling is very much mutual between Sophie and her son, she goes and meets with her new fiancé. They talk about how Francesca's doing, but then they get into the fact of their own relationship, and mainly, they haven't told anyone. Yeah, the only person that knows is Lady Danbury. But Violet requests the fact that they do, in fact, keep this a secret for now. She doesn't want to overshadow anyone's loss, grief. It's a sad time, so she wants to let the loss of John die down before they announce themselves to society. Meanwhile, Sophie had gone to the market. She ran into Alfie, and she's really excited to see him, knowing that she'll be working with him again in the coming days. But Alfie's got horrible news. He tells her, you can't work at the new Penwood estate. Yeah, I'm sorry. When you sent word to the new Lady Penwood that you wanted to delay your hiring, she couldn't wait. She hired somebody else. And Sophie is like, Alfie, I can't continue to work at Bridgerton House. You don't understand. This is killing me being around him. So they start talking about possible jobs, and Alfie's got one job that she could do. There's a family, and they've got great recommendations. The only hitch is they're moving to the Americas in 3 days, and Sophie would be required to be on that ship in 3 days. It's going to be a lot. I mean, a huge change for Sophie, but in her mind, she can't be around Benedict anymore, so she tells Alfie, yeah, put in the call. Sophie then grabs what she needs at the market, and she starts heading back to the Bridgerton household, where Mr. Dundas has shown up to visit both Francesca and Benedict to talk about the lineage. The one question he really has is, are you a child? And he's expecting a no, but she says, yeah, I am. And that surprises the entire room, especially Benedict, but he thinks, oh, this is great. But when Mr. Dundas says, okay, we need to take you for an examination to confirm this, that's when the mood changes. Francesca doesn't want to go. Mr. Dundas is adamant, I'm sorry, but this is the way things are. We have to confirm right now. And Benedict snaps. He takes all his frustration out about what's going on with him and Sophie and their relationship, and he just unloads on Dundas, hiding behind the guise that this is merely about an examination for his sister. He really gives it to him. But credit to Dundas. He's like, yeah, that's cool, bro. Unfortunately, we still need to go for an examination. And Francesca says, fine. However, when the doctor does come in, he gives them horrible news. She's not with child. She's simply late. For the Bridgerton household, this is yet another blow for them. But for Benedict, he's so on edge that he goes to his study, he starts looking for a paper that he can't find, and he just starts throwing shit. And at this point, Sophie has returned. She overhears the commotion, she opens the door, and she's surprised to see Benedict. They once again try to do this act of acting professional, but it doesn't last. They get close, they get closer, they almost kiss, but they realize they shouldn't, and they again pull away. Now, the only person that is going through it worse than Benedict is indeed Francesca, for obvious reasons. She just lost her husband, and she lost this child that she had talked up in her head as being real. Her mother that night tries to comfort her, but Francesca just doesn't want to hear it. Her mother thinking that they're the same. I mean, they both lost a husband, but Francesca says, no, we're not the same. You have 8 children. I have none. Francesca just starts beating herself up over the fact that she could not give John a child, but her mother, she's there for her. She comforts her. She lets her know, this isn't your fault. After comforting Francesca, Violet decides to go comfort the other grieving member in the household, Benedict. She apologizes, saying, you know what, Benedict, you're right. I had talked up love matches your entire life, but I just simply didn't realize that that's what this was. I didn't realize that you were in love with Sophie. She's not against the marriage. She loves Sophie, but she breaks down the harsh reality for Benedict. They would have to live their entire life in the country. They'd have to flee immediately. Because of the fact that he married out of societal standards, they would be essentially ostracized. This wouldn't just have an effect on him. This would have an effect on the Bridgerton name, the family. They wouldn't see each other as much. They'd really only communicate through writing. But it would also have an impact on Hyacinth, Gregory, and Eloise. You know, those who haven't married yet. So again, she's not against it. She just wants Benedict to really think this through before he makes a decision. But she also lets him know, whatever you do, I'm going to love you. I will support you. I will be here for you. And I will respect whatever decision you make for your life because I want you to be happy. That's exactly what Benedict does. He thinks long and hard about it that night and the next morning, where right upstairs, Sophie is preparing to leave. She gets an unexpected visitor, though. It's Posey. While Araminta and Rosamund went to the modiste, Posey had snuck out of the household, knowing that her mother instructed Farley to track her and see if she would lead them to Sophie. She didn't. She was very careful, but she finds Sophie in the Bridgerton household to let her know, Mother's after you. She's trying to get the magistrate to arrest you for those clips that I gave you to sell. Even though I told her that you're not a thief, she doesn't care. She's out to get you. And that's when Sophie tells her, well, I'm leaving for the Americas in 3 days. I'll never see her again, but, thanks for the heads up. But before she departs, Posey lets Sophie know that how her mother treated Sophie was not right. How her mother talked about Sophie's mother was not right. How Sophie was always so good to them. And how Sophie must have gotten that strength from her mother. And Sophie really appreciates that. When Posey returns, her mother and Farley are waiting for her. You would think that Araminta would just lash out at Posey, but she chooses another route. She actually apologizes for how she's treated Posey this entire season. She goes on to explain, though, how difficult it was for her to find a husband. Then she found another one, he died, and at that point, you're not going to find a third husband. So finding the perfect husband for her daughters has been crucial. And in her opinion, the one thing standing in everybody's way, the one thing that could take down this house of cards is Sophie. That's why it's so important for her to find Sophie. Her mother then lets it slip that they know Sophie's at Bridgerton House because Farley had seen Sophie at the market wearing Bridgerton House gear, so it's only a matter of time before the magistrate shows up, finds Sophie, and arrests her. And at that point, Posey, trying to protect her friend, says, Mom, Sophie's leaving for the Americas in 3 days. She'll be out of our hair. We don't have to worry about her. She thinks that that'll be enough for her mother to back down. Boy, is she wrong. The only person, though, that Sophie has told that she's leaving for the Americas is, well, obviously Posey, but also Hazel. She doesn't want to make a big deal about the fact that she's leaving Bridgerton House for the Americas, so everybody is under the assumption she's leaving for the new Penwood estate. The staff, though, has to get ready for a celebration of life that night. After a conversation with Benedict, Francesca realized that she needs to make things right with Michaela. Michaela also has a right to grieve in her own way, and she says, you know what? Yeah, let's have a celebration of life for my husband. So everybody's invited, and that's what they do. They go around, they share stories about how great John was. But during this celebration of life, Benedict flies in the room, finding his mother, and he says, I gotta go. I gotta go back to Bridgerton House. Because he's realized at this point, his decision is made. He's going to propose to Sophie. And his mother is excited for him. She says, you know what? I left a ring in my study, so go grab that. And Benedict flies over to the household. He's trying to catch Sophie before she leaves for the Penwood estate. He goes upstairs, he grabs the ring, but then he notices on his bedroom floor that there's a necklace. And it looks really familiar. Before he goes off to find Sophie, he starts looking through the drawings of the mystery girl from the ball, and he confirms that the mystery girl, this whole time, was the girl he's in love with. It was Sophie. And he just had no idea. But when he goes to actually find Sophie, he can't. He rushes downstairs and he talks to the waitstaff, and they let him know Sophie left for the Penwood estate. But Benedict is so frantic about this whole situation. He's so on edge that Hazel says, no, I gotta tell you right now, she's not going to the Penwood estate. She's set to go on a ship and leave for the Americas. And that's when panic really sets in for Benedict. He rushes outside to try to find her, but it's too late. She's gone. There's a little silver lining to this, kind of. She never made it to the household that's going to the Americas. But that's because she was arrested. As she was leaving Bridgerton House, Araminta and the magistrate showed up and arrested her for those stolen goods. So she's in jail. And in the season finale, while Sophie sits in jail, Rosamund gets engaged, which is really exciting for everybody. We're talking Araminta, we're talking Posey. But Posey's mood completely changes when she finds out that Araminta is leaving to go to the jail to visit Sophie. She really thought that when she told her mother, Sophie's leaving for the Americas in 3 days, we don't have to deal with her, that would be enough. But the actions of Araminta, having Sophie arrested for something that she didn't do, yeah, Posey's disgusted by that. Posey tries her best to stick up for Sophie, saying that she's a good person, but Araminta doesn't want to hear it, and she heads off to the jail. But one person that did overhear it was Farley. And up until this point, Farley had believed that Sophie was in fact a criminal, but now hearing all this, she knows the truth, and she's not going to stand for it. The first place she stops is the old Penwood estate, but Alfie tells her, look, I know who we really need to talk to, and they head over to Bridgerton House. They tell Hazel everything. And Hazel heads up to tell the Bridgertons, because this is an urgent matter. It takes a little bit to interrupt the group, but when Hazel finally does tell them, they jump into action. And by they, I mean Violet and Benedict. They head right over to the courthouse, just in enough time to interrupt the proceedings between the magistrate, Sophie, and Araminta. And because of Sophie's social stature, she was about to get charged with the crimes, even though it is a her word against mine situation. But when Benedict and Violet show up, it changes a lot, because their social situation is much higher than Araminta's, and they vouch for Sophie, sticking up for her. Now, the Bridgertons and Araminta go back and forth arguing about who's in the right and who's in the wrong, and the judge does try to settle this by saying, look, if they just pay you for these shoe clips, will you take that? But for Araminta, no, she won't. She wants blood, basically. What she's really offended at is that Sophie had played herself off as somebody from society by borrowing the clothes. So this whole thing is going to be settled at a different date. The Bridgertons beg the judge to release Sophie into their custody, with Violet saying, I can't handle my household without her. She works for us. And the judge telling everybody, can you guys just figure this out on your own so I don't have to get in the way of it? But if they can't come to an understanding, this will go to trial. The trio then head back to Bridgerton House, where on the way back, Violet breaks down the aftermath of all of this. She says, look, if Araminta doesn't win her battle in court, she might try to do it in public. And if that's the case, then the queen finds out the trickle-down effect is not going to be good for any of us. She does, though, wrap it up by saying, Sophie, I'm glad you're here and welcome home. And for Sophie, she's going to be treated as a guest, not a servant, until all of this is resolved. But there are rules. Her and Benedict, they're not supposed to get it on. No, no, no. None of that fun stuff. And it's not going to be as easy as the honor system. As Sophie and Benedict are discussing the matter of Sophie's missing necklace and Sophie apologizing for not telling him earlier that she was the mystery woman from the ball, saying, I was just worried that you'd be disappointed. Benedict saying, I was far from disappointed. They get interrupted by John, the guy that's supposed to be there to make sure that, well, they stay away from each other. Obviously, though, Sophie and Benedict want to make this work, but the person that's really putting a lot of pressure on themselves to make this work is Violet. She's desperately trying to think of a solution on how Benedict can marry Sophie and also stay in society. And she goes to the one person that she thinks might be able to help, and that is Lady Danbury. She tells Danbury everything, and she also includes the fact that she's pretty sure Sophie is from nobility, if that counts, but Lady Danbury says, not if her mom was a maid. No, it's not going to work. Now, Lady Danbury is willing to try. I mean, it's an incredible story, and it also is going to help with the fact that the Queen does have that bet about Benedict marrying by the end of the season. But she also warns Violet, it's probably not going to work, but yeah, I'll try. She's also willing to delay her trip, but Violet says, no, you talking to the Queen is enough. No, it's your time to go, live your life. But Sophie's nobility is actually a topic over at Bridgerton House. Because thanks to Hazel, Sophie was able to sneak in at Benedict's chambers, and she started discussing the fact that her father had said he was always going to take care of her, but when it came to the will, he didn't. Araminta had said that there was nothing in the will about Sophie, and Benedict cuts her off and says, why do you believe that? This woman has done nothing but try to ruin your life, and you're taking her word for it that your father abandoned you like that? No. We got to get to the bottom of that. We have to see that will. That's going to require sneaking in to the Penwood estate, getting into her dad's old office and finding it. But before they even think about that, they have to have sex first, folks, because they're in love. And that's what you do. And they have tub sex. It's not so much hot. It's more like it's wet. But yeah, they do that. The next day, though, when Sophie wakes up, she faces one of the Bridgerton members that she hasn't faced since the coming out party, if you will, of the relationship between herself and Benedict, and that person is Eloise. And Sophie is really, really worried about how Eloise will perceive her, but Eloise is just mad that she didn't figure it out sooner. And it's a big relief to Sophie, but then she says, hey, I actually need a favor. She explains the whole situation with her father's will and going over to the Penwood estate, knowing that Eloise is kind of friendly with Cressida, and Eloise is more than happy to help. So the two head over there, and Eloise is going to distract Cressida and give just enough time for Sophie to get upstairs and, with the help of the rest of the staff, find a way to get into her dad's old office, her dad's desk, find the will, and read it to figure out if there's anything that they can use to make a case that Araminta is not to be trusted. And she does find it. It's the fact that she had a dowry that she was never told about, but also the fact that Araminta was paid for every year that she kept Sophie. That's the real reason why she kept her, despite the fact that she hated her. She was getting paid. Both facts, mind you, that Araminta never told her about. And while Sophie is doing her part, Lady Danbury was also trying to help the cause by gently bringing up the topic to the Queen to see how she would react. She gives the Queen all the dirt. I mean, now with no whistle down, the Queen is desperate for gossip. And while the Queen finds it exhilarating, she also says, yeah, I mean, I could win the bet, but I'm not going to because Benedict cannot marry the maid. It's a topic that Lady Danbury can't really press too much because it just seems like the Queen isn't up for a conversation. She's made her stance on the matter. So they're going to have to figure out another way around this. That's when Alice Mondrich, who overheard the entire conversation, gets to thinking. When she gets home that day, she complains to Will about what she's been up to as a lady in waiting, and she's just been bored to death. I mean, it's just tedious work. And while she knows she's eventually supposed to take over for Lady Danbury in the coming days, she doesn't feel like she has the Queen's ear like Lady Danbury does. She feels like she's doing this menial, boring task. And maybe this whole situation with Benedict, maybe that could be it. She just has to come up with an idea. She thinks on it, and she gets that idea. She heads over to Bridgerton House, and she tells both Benedict and Violet bad news. Well, Lady Danbury didn't have much success, but I have another plan. And the plan is going to involve sneaking Sophie into the next ball. The ball, by the way, that is hosted by the Queen in Lady Danbury's honor. It's like a going away party, if you will. There's a few other steps to this, but essentially that's step one, getting Sophie in. And that night when Sophie and Benedict finally link up, Sophie tells Benedict all about the will and how Benedict was right. Her father did take care of her. Benedict thinks this is great news because it means that Lady Gunn is a thief and a liar. But to Sophie, it's not the end of the line. It doesn't mean that she can marry Benedict. I mean, she's still lacking the nobility title, but Benedict lets her know, I don't care about that. I just want to be with you. And then he tells her all about Alice Mondrich's plan. One of the people that will also be attending the ball is Eloise. She goes to check in on Hyacinth, who hasn't been herself since John's death. She was all gung-ho about joining society and finding a husband, but since realizing that her father suddenly died, leaving her mother a widow, and now John suddenly dying, leaving her sister a widow, is this what love is? And it's Eloise who actually talks her back into getting excited about marriage. Eloise, the person that's totally against it, yeah, she's like, after spending a season by your side, I've also seen the good of trying to marry somebody. She really brightens her sister's spirits, and then she heads off to the ball, where sneaking Sophie in isn't all that hard. I mean, there's so many people there, it's just literally like walking in. And shortly afterwards, Alice Mondrich sees them and escorts Sophie, Benedict, and Violet into a separate room and says, hey, wait here. She then goes out and grabs Araminta and her girls, and she forces a conversation between the two. This is where the Bridgertons lay all their cards on the table, telling Araminta, hey, the jig's up. Like, we know about the will. We know that there's a dowry. We know that you lied about it. We know that you embezzled the funds. These are bigger accusations than what you're accusing Sophie of, so let's just settle this now. And at first, Araminta doesn't want to. She still looks at Sophie as a threat. It's not until Rosamund and Posey step in and go, Sophie was never a threat. Stop. Enough. What it really boils down to, though, is Araminta has always blamed Sophie for costing her second husband. She looks at Sophie as getting what she deserved. So, because she had the power, she took all of that away from Sophie. But now, with everybody kind of going at Araminta about the topic, and with the accusations about the stolen money from the dowry and the embezzling and all of that, she's had to kind of backtrack a lot. And when she does, Alice Mondrich goes out and tries to fetch the Queen. When she tells the Queen, oh, I have Benedict Bridgerton's maid, the one that he's in love with, she's here, and I want you to go talk to him. Queen is like, I'm not doing that. No way. There's no chance that he is going to marry her. But Alice Mondrich stands on business. 10 toes down, she turns into Lady Danbury, pushing back and saying, at one point, you were the unpopular choice. At one point, people didn't want you here. But look at you now. You're the most powerful person in this town. You're very eclectic. You're interesting. You're smart. You like the arts. And you know what? The girl that Benedict Bridgerton wants to marry is the exact same way. She's not just a maid. She's interesting. And she deserves to be heard. And the Queen, and by the way, Lady Danbury, they're so impressed by this that they get up and they walk into the room. At this point, though, things have changed a bit. When Benedict goes to introduce Sophie to the Queen, he does so by saying, let me introduce Miss Sophie Gunn. I mean, that's how much Araminta has backed off. She's willing to acknowledge the fact that Sophie is coming from nobility. And the Queen is a little thrown off at first and looks at Alice and says, didn't you say it was the maid? But Alice, immediately being wise, says, oh, I must have been mistaken. And the Queen recognizes the Gunn name. She listens to the lie that is created that Sophie was just living in the country, but now she's back home in society. And she gives her blessing on the relationship. The Queen caps it off by going up to Sophie and saying, you would have made a wonderful diamond. While the Queen recognizes that the story that she was told was a lie, she loves it. She loves the drama, and she loves the fact that Araminta, who she's not really a fan of, has had to back down her entire argument. Unfortunately, the trickle-down effect for all of this is felt with Rosamund, who had agreed to marry a certain guy that was really just gold digging. When he found out that Rosamund's dowry was cut in half because of what happened, he leaves. Colin, Eloise, and Penelope all watch this go down, and Penelope is kind of giving analysis with it, saying, yeah, I kind of figured that would happen. It's unfortunate for the family. They were banking on one of their daughters marrying. Eloise has a big smile on her face. Because early in the night, Eloise met with Posey and encouraged her to go up to a guy who's been after her for a while. But Posey was fine playing second fiddle to her sister. Her mother was so focused on her sister this entire season that Posey had taken a back seat. But it was Eloise who encouraged her, don't let your mother choose your joy. I mean, go after what you want. Your mother is over there. She's distracted. This guy's interested in you. He's a good guy. Go dance with him. And when Eloise looks over, that's exactly what Posey's doing. She's talking to that guy that Eloise had encouraged her to talk to. Most of the ball, however, is solely focused on Benedict and Sophie. They've never seen Sophie before, and Violet goes around mentioning how Sophie is from nobility to give the relationship legitimacy, to squash that rumor that's going to swirl that Sophie was a maid. But as everybody's dancing, including Benedict and Sophie, you've got the Queen and Lady Danbury discussing what just went down with Alice Mondridge. The Queen has the utmost respect for what Alice just planned, this whole thing. The two friends, though, start laughing. They start talking about the best thing to happen all season, which Lady Danbury points out the best thing to happen all season is you're going to win your wager. I mean, Benedict's going to get married. But as they laugh and laugh, they also realize that their time together is quickly coming to an end. And for them, it's really emotional. When the music stops, that's when Benedict pulls out the ring. He finally proposed to Sophie. Shocker, she accepts. But while there is one engagement, another one actually ends. Upon seeing the engagement, Marcus walks up to Violet and says, "This is great. Should we announce our engagement?" But Violet says no. I mean, at first she dances around the topic, but what it really boils down to is she actually tells this guy, "I want to be friends with Benny's." Yeah. So here's the thing, man. I was a wife for a while, and then after that I was a mother. And, well, after sleeping with you, I realized I can enter my hoe phase. Yeah, that's right. I can just get dicked down by a new guy every night, and you're cool, don't get me wrong. I mean, I do like you. But marriage, then I'm tied to you for a while, so I don't really know how I feel about that. So yeah, look, let's just stay in contact. We'll be fuck buddies, and we'll see just what happens. And Marcus looks at her and says, "Are you fucking kidding me? You see, first of all, we're pushing 60, all right? Like, no, I need a ride or die." So he leaves. I mean, they was much more eloquent than the way I put it, but yeah, no, they're not going to be a thing anymore. Unfortunately, that love seems to be done. And she wasn't the only Bridgerton to lose somebody that night. For poor Francesca, she loses yet another person. She had asked Michaela to stay, mentioning, "Look, I know that you never stay in one place at one time very long, but I'd really appreciate it if you stuck around for a bit. I've grown fond of you." She went to go hold Michaela's hand, but Michaela she pulled it away. And in the dead of night, she packed up her stuff and she just headed out. She had mentioned something about unconventional love and, she didn't want a husband, so you figure there might have been something going on there between those two that Francesca may not have realized. Other than that, the rest of the Bridgertons seem happy. Benedict's going to get married to Sophie. You've got Penelope writing a book. And oh, by the way, there's a new Whistledown. And I'm going to predict it right now. Pretty sure it's Eloise. That's just my best guess. That is the end of Season 4 of Bridgerton. Thank you so much for getting this part of the recap. I really appreciate it. Consider subscribing to the channel. Hit thumbs up if you like this video. Smash that thumbs down button if you thought it sucked. And let me know what you thought of this season. I thought it was the best one, honestly. I loved it. I have merch. I have t-shirts. I don't have books. No, that's a lie. But I have mugs and t-shirts. You can also become a channel member or join my Patreon. That'd be cool, too. I'd really appreciate it. Supporting, helps. But overall, just be nice in the comments section. Nasty comments make me feel bad. They hurt my feelings. I'm a person. Anyway, I'll be back for Season 5. Thank you so much.